summer's getting warmer, tidal waves are coming at the Mexican border. Why, by gallon, it's cheaper by the barrel, just don't get busted singing Christmas carols.
I quit eating it when I saw it in the grocery store in a, in the little display there. No,
I think that's the end of my eating.
Yeah.
We were bringing a boat back from Trinidad in 2017, and it probably had $10,000 worth of meat in the freezer. You can't bring it in the States. Meat and dairy, you can't bring it in the States. So when we were about a day out, me and two other guys took it all out on deck and cut open the packaging and just threw that meat overboard. And there was beef tongue, there was, chicken, there was steaks, just throwing it overboard.
Oh, wow.
Because once we go into port in Fushan, the customs guys come on the boat.
Yeah.
Check all your shit.
Have you ever had beef tongue?
No, I don't eat that stuff. No.
I didn't either. My wife's mom, she's part Mexican, and I forget how they say it, but oh, good grief, I forget what it's called. But anyway, she made some, and they tricked me, and eating it. And I'm sitting there getting seconds and thirds of it, and I had no clue. Then they told me what it was, and I'm like, well, I've already ate this much of it, and I really like it, so the heck with it, I'm gonna keep eating it.
Yeah, it may be good.
It's just, see, that's the thing. When I knew what it was, I'm like, no, I'm not trying it.
It's like frog legs. I accidentally ate some frog legs once, and they didn't taste bad to me. Once I found they were frog legs, I wouldn't eat no more of it.
Yeah.
Tastes like chicken. Exactly, like a little piece of chicken.
Yeah.
But once I found out it was frog legs, I said, I don't do amphibians, man.
Well, the chicken is actually a descendant of reptiles, so kind of close to a frog.
Well, according to evolution, aren't we all, though?
Yeah, we were all chickens at one time.
No, reptile.
Talking about throwing meat and stuff over at Walmart. I've seen it firsthand there.
Just think Tyrannosaurus chicken.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. The beef and stuff back there, they get thrown away. It would blow your mind. Working back there and all that and seeing it, nothing wrong with it. Maybe somebody grabbed it and they put it in the wrong side of the cooler. Nothing wrong with it, it just stood in the wrong side of the cooler for a little while and thrown away. At the end of the night, when you throw everything out, all the trash and everything out, you go out there and it would blow my mind. You're throwing all this seafood, shrimp, all this stuff out, and you're thinking, we have all this problem with people going hungry and stuff, and here we are throwing out all this food and stuff, and there ain't nothing wrong with it.
Where was it?
This was Walmart.
Well, I
Right
think
here. Our
that
Walmart.
could go, you ground up and go into feed, animal feed, really.
Oh, yeah.
High protein.
I know my nephew used to work years ago at Stop and Shave there, Stop and Save there at Pace.
Yeah.
And he'd bring home all kind of stuff that they were
Your
going to throw
brother and I
away.
have the same
Yeah.
They
tailor.
were good.
Well, see, that's the other thing, we always said, like, why don't they let the employees,
Right.
going away, and they wouldn't let them. They wouldn't let the employees
Tommy
take it.
That's-
Maybe like in another place at Walmart,
Yeah, that's not right.
no, they wouldn't let it had to be thrown away.
Oh.
And, because trust me, that conversation comes up quite a bit, because you see these perfectly nice, beautiful T-bones, ain't nothing wrong with them, and, good grief, and half the employees there are struggling to make it anyway, that meat could go a long way, but yet.
They feel that if they normalize that, they let people do that, then they'll start manipulating so they can take stuff home
Yeah.
at night.
Not only that, they get money for throwing that stuff away. They sell that waste and stuff. People come by and buy all that organic stuff, and they sell the organics, and they sell the meat waste. They sell all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's not being wasted then, so it's going
Right.
into another use.
Right.
You're right. I had an uncle that he had several restaurants, and I think one or two of them you had to pay him for their scraps, and he took them and fed them to his hogs.
That's
He
what-
had
that's what
like
they-
100 hogs.
So that's what they do with the
Yeah.
organic stuff, and you had to go out, and they had different canisters you had for different things. You had your greens and vegetables and fruit to go in one thing, and then of course the meat had to be separated.
Yeah.
But my thing is if you already got a bad reputation for a company, treating your employees like crap,
Yeah.
and so why not
Give them
Just give
spoiled
them-
meat.
you
Just give
know,
them
I mean,
spoiled
well,
meat.
it's not spoiled meat, you know, I mean, it's spoiled, yeah, but, I
Right.
mean, there's many times that there's nothing wrong with it at all, it's just.
Well, they're only third-rate citizens, they should get third-rate meat.
I worked at the old Walmart in Milton for a year.
Third-rate.
One night, our night manager opened the back doors to go out and get another
Third-rate.
pallets to
That
bring
ain't
in,
right.
because we were unloading
That ain't
trucks.
right, that ain't right.
And,
That's how they treat it.
Cut that out, Big.
Oh, yeah,
It's
finally.
truthful.
he saw a guy standing by they had a cage out back where they would put old car batteries. And he saw a guy standing out there by it. And he came in to get a couple of us. Well, the guy saw him and took off running, went around the building. Anyway, a cop was sitting on the other side of the building, just happened to be doing his paperwork, and he sees this guy come running. So he goes over and snatches him up. So we're out back standing there looking at this cage where the batteries were, and he had cut through it. He had a shopping cart full of batteries, and the weight got so much that the shopping cart collapsed. So the guy, we caught him right at the moment when all this was happening. So the cop comes around the corner as we're standing there shaking, scratching our head, and he's got this guy in the back seat. And the night manager said, "Yeah, that's the guy that just tried to steal all our old batteries.
Man.
He was going to take them and get 50 cents a piece for them at the recycling place."
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Great.
But, you know, but all you third-rate citizens, you know, I work there, you know, and.
Well, that's you, you're a third-rate.
Exactly, and that's how I can say it from firsthand, you know, now, don't get me wrong, some of the nicest and best people that I've ever worked with
We're
were
third-rate.
employees there,
Yeah,
yeah,
we're
they were
third-rate.
the third-rate citizens along with me.
We really have nothing against third-rate.
I used to work there.
You know, and
That's
some
where I
of
met my wife.
That's
That's
just worse.
that's where I met my wife.
Yeah, a greeter, yeah.
Deplorable, wasn't that the same, deplorable, same thing?
Same thing.
Yeah, but, you know, like I said, some of the hardest working people I worked with worked there, and I've seen how the management treated those employees, and it was horrible, man, you know, when you have people there for year after year after year, and they refuse to give them full time, and then they turn around and hire brand new people, and then give them full time, and they're making more money, because these people got hired in at this rate, but the people that just got hired in, they got hired in at the new rate, so you've been there 40 years, and you're making this amount, this person gets hired in, you're making 50 cents more,
I'm trying to tell you to move on.
but they're trying to do something, and that's the other thing, they do that to the managers too. If you hit 20 years, if you do not want to promote, they force you to retire.
Yeah.
You're gone.
Yep, that's what the plan is.
That's exactly what it is. They sure as heck do it too.
Our manager when I was there was Jimmy Cross, and he left the store in Milton to go to Hawaii to open up their first Walmart in Hawaii.
Oh my.
And he was there for
Jimmy.
a while, and then he came back to the Milton store and took back over.
Mm.
But I know like 4 people working at the Walmart in Pea Ridge that was working at the Milton Walmart in 1994 that are still working for Walmart.
Dang.
But there's a reason. Why do they still work there?
Well, one of the guy I know, he's just there because that's all his ambition is, you know.
They just get the cash every week, whatever they're making a week is fine.
Yeah, because when I left to go work offshore, he goes, "Oh, you're not going to stay out there. You'll be back." I'm like, "Yeah, okay."
Some of them, like you're saying, some of them, that's all they care to do. Now, Jimmy Cross, you know, I got to know Jimmy when I was a little younger. Him and Dad were good friends, and Dad made him one of the honorary members of the tribe. And when I was working there, he wasn't there. He'd already retired from the Pea Ridge one, but he came back to work and over the one on 29. And his only job over there was to keep the popcorn filled up. And they had a buggy at each entrance, and it had popcorn bags in it. His only job was to keep the popcorn back up. I worked for a security company. Well, and so me and him got to work hand in hand all the time right there, and that's where I got to really know Jimmy and everything. And great guy, very nice guy, and we talk and all this other stuff. But anytime one bag would be gone, I'll be back. He'd go make some more popcorn, fill it back up, bring it in there. There was one time these kids come in, they walk in, each one of them grab a bag, and these are these long, skinny bags of popcorn. They all grab a bag, and of course, they walk around the store, eat popcorn. Jimmy was like a dadgum ninja, following these kids around, just spying on them everywhere they went, and watching them. And then when they got ready to come out the door, he ran and got in front of them and stopped them. And these kids didn't know what to think. He said, "I watched you walk around the whole store eating my popcorn. He said, you're not about to steal my popcorn.
Oh,
You know where that money goes? Well, no, sir, that money goes, because the money went to children's charity. It wasn't Walmart's, all the money was for local kids charity, so he enjoyed it. And once he explained it to him, he sat there and set them down, and they sat out there for a good 30 minutes talking to him, and when it all got up and said and done, they gave him a hug, and they shook his hand and walked out. He turned them into, actually liking them. And, but once he explained, he broke it down where all that money went for all the bags of popcorn, how they help, put food on kids' tables and stuff like that, but
Wow.
he took that job serious, man.
I knew a girl worked in the shoe department, and she was stocking one morning. She noticed this real scruffy looking guy with these old worn out tennis shoes, and he was standing in the aisle of her shoes section, and so she's kind of keeping an eye on him. Well, she noticed that all of a sudden he was gone, so she went where he was at, and she found his old run down shoes on the shelf, and he had taken another pair. So she alerted store security, and they found him. He was still walking around the store. Well, he must have noticed that they were trailing him. And they won't bust you until you try to leave the store. You can stay in there and walk, they won't say nothing. So they were all prepared to bust this guy. Well, he took the shoes off and left them on a shelf in another department, and he left the store barefooted. So he came in wearing old run down, beat up shoes, ended up leaving without any shoes at all.
Yeah, you're right. They'll sit there and they'll follow you around the whole store.
Oh my God.
And then I knew a department manager named Lisa, and they were trailing somebody like that one day that had stolen something, and the person bolted out of the store and was running toward the Taco Bell in the corner of the parking lot over there.
Okay.
Lisa chased this person. I think it was a female, but anyway, whoever it was, she chased this person down and tackled her in the parking lot.
Good Lord, that must have hurt.
Well,
That's asphalt.
Oh,
yeah, I know.
That hurts. Just
She was a tough girl.
Yeah. What years was you working?
I was there in '94.
Do you remember? I was a little boy.
Part of '95.
But I used to love him, man. His wife was a teacher at Eastmill Elementary School, and she was my favorite teacher, Miss Butler. And her husband worked at Walmart. He worked in the sporting goods. He was an old man. I don't know his first name, of course, Mr. Butler. But he would come in, and he was just a nice guy. And then we had another guy, her dad would come in and volunteer at the school, and he would make in, now this goes to show you, I was in the last part of when school was normal, when they'd actually had power tools in the classroom, okay?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because this guy, he would come in, and if you were good that week, you got to make a toy, a wooden toy, and you'd go over there with his name was Mr. Rab, and he'd make a little race car, something out of wood and everything, and he would help you. But anyway, you said you worked there then, and I know Mr. Butler worked there back then, and he passed away now, of course, but I used to love going in there and talking with him the whole time, man. And I can still literally walk into that store in my head and look at everything the way it was. From the front entrance, you go in, you took a left, and over there to the left, you had the little food section over there. I can still walk around that whole store.
Yeah, that little snack bar they had, they the same people be lined up. They weren't open all night. They opened at 7 in the morning. And it'd be the same people lined up outside waiting to come in, and they go straight to the little snack bar and drink coffee for hours and just talk like this.
Yeah, which is what's missing in a lot of places. We need this in Shamoka. We need a place where people just come hang out, drink coffee, and talk. Because how else do you learn stuff about third-rate people other than sit around and talk?
Facebook, social media.
They used to have these like clubs or reading rooms where people just come and drink coffee and read the newspaper and talk, I think that'd be neat to open a little place like that.
It
Of
would
course,
be.
probably go broke, but
But it turned into like they do the lefties do over at Starbucks, and they come in all day and they bring their own coffee and sit there and stay on the computer all day.
use your Wi-Fi.
Yeah, just use your Wi-Fi.
That's when you got your little cattle prod or something. Just time to move along.
Yeah.
Oh, that reminded me of that you and Dick at coffee break.
Yeah.
Somebody asked you how'd you got that table.
Yeah, we kind of stole it.
Yes.
While they were up getting coffee, we stole their table.
It looks empty, right?
Yeah, we said it had a telephone. It had a phone on it.
Oh,
And a cup that wasn't full of coffee.
thought they left.
And we thought, well, they left their phone there. Well,
So we'll watch watch it for
It only left about 15 feet, huh?
Oh, my
It
God.
was interesting
That was
guys,
funny.
though, really fascinating guys to talk with.
Talking about the two young kids that was in there with you guys.
That was funny. That was funny, yeah. He got up.
One of them was named Jonathan Polly, and the other boy was, his last name was, Gatling. So anyway, they were fascinating guys, and learned a lot talking to them. You hang around Dick, you meet all these interesting people.
See, y'all went on a road trip or something, seen somebody that you went to school with.
Jerry Kelly saw Jerry Kelly, and he just back from having a lot of therapy for a stroke. And then we went over to see Roy Allen. Before that, we had stopped by to see Stuart Cooley down in Baghdad and dropped off some pickled quail eggs.
Pickled or puckled?
Pickled or puckled?
Yeah, told Winston to have some puckled eggs.
Oh, I gotta spell better.
How big were those quail eggs?
Well, they're small. They're like,
Well, hell, the bird itself is just so small.
Yeah.
they're little. They're little eggs.
They're not chicken size.
But they're just like these eggs here, but like 1/5 the size.
I got a brother-in-law that had chickens and quail, and he would, sell the eggs, pickle them, and sell them over in Georgia.
I got some of them pickled eggs at Sam's the other day, a month or two ago. Don't recommend that.
Did you get the whole jar?
Yeah.
That's the way you have to get the
I know.
That's
Well, it wasn't a big jar. It was a little smaller. It fits in the refrigerator easy enough.
Well, I had a lady at work, and this was years ago, for my birthday, she brought a gallon of pickled eggs, chicken eggs. And I said, I never ate.
Did she make them though?
Oh, my
Yeah.
dad, my
And
dad
they were
used to
red.
love
She
those
put
things.
beet juice in them.
Yeah, but that's right, that's
Yeah.
right.
Uh-huh.
I
Now, those are
just-
good homemade ones, but these things are hard.
Oh. And I said, I never had pickled chicken eggs, never heard of pickled
Well,
chicken
these
eggs.
come from Paul's Hardware, so
They
maybe
got a
they're
little
good.
hard.
In a hardware store, that's hard to believe.
Onion and garlic hard boiled
My
pickled
dad
eggs,
used to love
packed in vinegar.
But I've had them.
They were great.
He'd get them in a gallon jar, and he'd
Yeah.
They
They were
My mother-in-law used to
absolutely
make them.
great. I mean, I just,
Well, my
Let me
mother
ask
used to
you,
can all that stuff and make her own.
Get ready to do that series about centers of
Well, I
gallons
remember
we talked
Great
about.
big crock full of
And what I did
sauerkraut.
was,
Yeah.
we got the first person, we're
Yeah,
gonna,
She did that for
Cinnamon,
my dad
it's gonna
because
be a
he
lot
eats German and,
that's the
Well,
first.
you
person
did enough
was down.
sauerkraut over
But
Korea.
what I did was for the
no,
location,
we didn't have any of that,
the people.
But that-
I'll
that,
tell
they
me
call it
start out
over
with.
there,
The first choices,
kimchi.
for
Yeah,
the
kimchi.
first three recommendations
They
I
put
got were
spices in it.
Arcadia
Make it
Mill,
hot.
Florida
Oh,
Town,
I just had,
and
I
Baghdad.
don't
The
recall ever
location.
And,
Any food
so
that
what I
I-
did was,
They no
I put
no
a boat
nails.
out there and
I
let
got
everybody
beaten
decide right
with,
now, Florida Town's
Russians
leading the way.
when I first time
And
I
of
went to
course,
Russia.
that's people
Uh-huh.
messaging me, where the heck would you go
Well,
to start
yeah,
out
that's-
with? Ain't no Florida Town, but trash, and I'm saying, wait a minute, you obviously not from this area, you don't know the history. You
Six
know.
months there were
Florida Town is not,
EPA
it's
shut
not
down
trash,
the cement,
that's a lot of history right down
Yeah,
there.
the park is decent looking.
Yeah,
Like
and
Florida,
they've
this
actually
was
done a lot of
about,
stuff down there recently, but.
72.
who was it that suggested Warren Basin?
That was my brother.
Okay, that's what I was
And
just
that's what I told
thinking.
him, I said, no, give me this 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah.
Right up to the cement.
Wasn't even listed,
It
you
had-
know.
it had-
Well, he's the one, I'm
you
already
had
doing,
meat
I feel like slapping him through the
And
post
so
because
I
I'm
had
already
the
doing his first,
72
he recommended
helpers
Elijah
on it.
Moore, so I'm already doing Elijah
One
Moore.
person for the fourth.
Person, you know,
Yeah.
but
I mean, because we were.
I'm like,
getting
dude, I'm not gonna do
it.
Elijah
Yeah.
Moore and also do
For
Fort
mine, no.
Basin at the
Right.
same time.
What's your
but-
brother's
What do you
name?
use the
Sam
concrete
Nichols.
for?
Oh,
What
yeah.
did you use the concrete for?
Trust me, I know.
Oh,
I
I
know.
didn't tell you.
Because he-
I don't wanna joke.
It's one of those,
Have to be
ghost
capped.
things.
Oh,
And, he
so
said something
they-
about-
they would've paid
Talking about the
anything for
drive-by
this.
shooting at the
Yeah.
ice factory,
Yeah.
and it's like the
Rather
second or
than
third
shut
time, and I
down.
said, man, there was no drive-by shooting
And
at
that's
the
when I
ice
started
factory.
drilling little
So
holes.
what is it now?
The drive-by was in East Milton. The ice factory burned down, and that was the catalyst that started this whole chain of events. I said, but there was no drive-by shooting at the ice factory in the 20s. That was also, it was 1931.
Almost nothing.
But
The government came in and said, okay, you
No,
guys
I
can
love
chip
my
up.
brother to death,
You
but he
can
started
drill,
it, you know?
and
Sam
maybe
is-
500
He's a sharp guy,
thousand
but
gallons.
he's not unlike me, in that he enjoys pushing
Yeah.
buttons.
Oh, God.
If you've got a button,
You
he's
find
gonna push
yourself in
it.
the share.
Let it be
I do
known.
that. I know exactly what
Yeah.
I'm doing.
That's
funny.
That's funny.
But a lot of people don't get it.
No, a lot of people take it the wrong way,
They
but he
think,
really,
oh my gosh.
yeah, they
he's
think he's
doing
being
what
a
I-
jerk, but he's really not. But,
Yeah.
and now,
No,
don't get me
you don't
wrong.
think people think I'm a jerk.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they all think we're all
No,
jerks.
no,
Oh, well, they'll get over it, you know.
Gosh, I don't want anybody thinking I'm a jerk.
Not the mayor, so.
He, the thing is that he means well, he really
Yeah.
does, but, and he knows a lot of local history, don't get me wrong, but there are times where he does mix things up, of course, and he doesn't like to admit when he's wrong, so.
Oh, that's
He is
tough.
me.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
a duplicate of me. My God, where did I come up? How did other people come out just like me?
Yeah.
Wow, this is a different.
No, they're still
Like
gonna
me
let
and
you.
him will get in arguments. We will literally get in arguments, and I know for a fact that I'm right. And he'll sit there and he went to so far to the point before to literally get on his phone and type stuff up. Like, see, I found it on Google. I'm like, you're an idiot, dude. I can see where you're on the media thing right there typing it up. And he,
It's on the internet, isn't it?
It's true, so that where you can't trust anything on Google anymore.
yeah. You know, I Googled, I was looking for stuff to do a story on, get some stuff to talk about. And if you Google Biden lies, just see all the list of lies that come up, it's ridiculous. It's not called, it's all, truth.com, factcheck.org and all that.
It's not a lie at all.
They always,
Biden said it.
all the articles that came up are all sitting there saying he doesn't tell the truth all the time, but he's not as bad as Trump. That's about all the articles are saying. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, man. This is getting ridiculous.
Well, they completely filter everything political.
Yeah,
To shade the truth
Now,
for
if you
against
Google,
Trump or for Biden.
yeah, if you Google Trump lies, dear God,
Oh yeah, you'll
waiting,
want the guy hung next week, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, if you Google Trump, you'll get Trump lies,
Yeah.
that's the first ones in
Well, I mean,
line.
it blew my mind, that impeachment thing, the blatant lies that they tried to roll with in
But
that.
this is how they did the whole election season.
Yeah, you're
Anything
right.
positive about Trump went to the back of the line, you couldn't even find it.
Yeah.
Anything positive about Biden went all the way to front.
Yeah.
So you couldn't even type anything about everything bad about, tell me all the bad stuff about Trump without getting a complete page of all the things that are good about Biden.
And they talked
It's the way
about,
Google does it, they
Yeah.
can filter it that way,
It's
so your
still
search
like
doesn't
that.
give you anything close to what you're looking
no,
for.
it's done like that all the way through too, like even YouTube is bad about doing it, all of them are bad about doing it.
Wikipedia is awful.
Gates.
You cannot look up anything on Wikipedia anymore about a conservative person without it being a negative
Cause
story.
anybody can edit it.
Yeah,
Not really. They
Just
only,
about, I bet.
only the people editing it are very liberal people. Otherwise,
Oh.
you can't get in the edit team for
Oh.
Wikipedia.
Well, on YouTube and stuff, we were talking last week when I don't really care for YouTube, and one reason being is for that reason. The people that I subscribe to, I subscribe to a lot of conservatives, and every single one of them, they'll tell you, please make sure you hit the like and subscribe thing each time, even though you've already subscribed, hit it again, because they will automatically pull them away, and they shadow ban is what it's called, and so. But now, say you type in, let's go to search and type in Trump videos, okay? It'll pull up all these videos and you find this one guy and you want to watch him, so you start watching them. Any other person, it'll keep throwing you more of their videos so you can continue to watch their stuff. But one of those guys are shadow banned, you have to actually search for these guys.
Yeah.
And they've done that to nearly all the conservative people on there.
Yeah, you can't find them without absolutely
Matt
searching for
Gaetz, actually, he was one of the first men to bring it up about the shadow banning like 2 years ago. And they called him, everybody said he was lying and all that.
That's
which-
true, it's a big thing now.
And he wasn't lying. He was one of the first ones they went after. When I spoke with him in it was Fort Walton Beach, he got voted as the most Trumpian, how do you say it, most Trumpian congressman in Congress. By Vogue magazine voted him that.
I like Matt Gaetz, but he's already pushing for Trump to run again in 24. And I'd rather see Trump stay in the background and have, I like the guy and I voted for him, I'd vote for him again, but I'd rather him build up a conservative network.
Let him be a kingmaker.
I'd rather him run that role.
Exactly.
And have DeSantis or somebody
But
else.
just really, but yeah, it's hard to come up against that Trump strategy. His policies were just amazing.
No,
And his
I
strategies
agree with
were
him. I'm just
quite
saying
good.
that he's so divisive though nowadays that
Well,
It's
You
gonna
know,
be like a
people will-
nuclear bomb.
it don't matter what he does,
Right.
he's gonna have at least 50% of people are gonna hate him. It don't
Yeah.
matter what he
Well,
does.
see,
they'll do that to anybody he picks.
yeah, this is
The
true.
thing is, who can fight back strongest?
I like Ron DeSantis
I like
Well,
DeSantis.
He does well.
But here's the
well.
thing.
I like
and Nikki Haley, although I don't agree with all her work.
Yeah.
But still,
She
as a
is
female,
She's a fighter,
I think she would definitely help the ticket.
but every now and then she wavers and you go, wait,
Yeah,
this is not the
exactly.
time to wait.
I didn't like her Confederate flag thing when she was governor, but
Well, you know, if Trump's already started, I'm looking forward to his speech tomorrow, see what he has to say in there. See back a bit first, but he's already interviewing candidates to run against these rhino Republicans already. So he's already starting, a party within a party type of deal.
He's gonna do a lot of that, I think.
Yeah, oh yeah, he is. He's got the money.
He's gonna clean the
Well,
swamp.
everybody's like, of course, he's got the money. Well, he's not just got his own money. He's got a lot of, of money from the party stuff right there as well. And he's already started interviewing everything. And what I'm thinking is going to happen is you're going to see Matt Gaetz is going to step aside out of Congress and open that seat up because what's going to happen is I believe you're going to have the lady, what's her name? She's the agriculture lady in Florida. She's a Democrat.
Yeah.
She's going to run against DeSantis for governor. It's going to leave that seat open. And then Matt Gaetz is going to go for that because that's usually always the second step into the governor. And you'll see DeSantis probably going to run. And of course, him and Trump are buddy. So I'm thinking Trump's not going to run. I think he's going to push hard with DeSantis, like you're saying. And that's
he's
going
smart.
to, but if he doesn't, they'll have DeSantis as governor running against the Department of Agriculture, our Department of Agriculture lady, which they'll leave the agriculture seat open. I believe Matt Gaetz will jump right in there. And the reason being is the next step is the governorship. And if later on, if Ron runs, the governor will come open for Florida. Boom, he jumps in right into the
Why
governor.
wouldn't
role right
Gates
there.
run for governor?
See, that's what I thought as well. But if you go back and look through the history of how it's worked, most of the time it's went from ag to the governor. Even what's his name? He was a Democrat, Bill Cullen, or what's? Come on. A couple years ago he ran. Anyway, the last couple of Democratic candidates, they were ag people, and then they ran against governor, and that's just my thinking right there. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, of course, by no means, but
I don't think Gates would step back to ag. Ag is a hidden spot. It's a powerful spot, but it's a hidden spot. It doesn't have the soapbox.
You're right. But here's the thing. Also, you got to look at also what it covers as well. I didn't know that right there covered all the gun stuff in Florida.
Yeah.
And it does. I had no clue about that.
Yeah.
And you would think, why the heck is that in there?
Yeah.
Somebody else can do that though.
Yeah, but my logic behind it was because you've seen all these people, they would jump into that spot, then they would run for governor type deal.
What about the guy that just barely lost to DeSantis and then got busted with
Oh, God.
the male crackhead down in a hotel in Miami?
What was it, Gilliam? or-
Yeah, Gilliam.
Yeah.
I mean, he came this close to being governor.
He did.
Oh man, he came so close.
Yeah.
I can't believe the people that actually thought that guy
I know.
was
Yeah.
worth being our governor.
I know.
Amazing.
Oh well, he's a Democrat. He's a kind-hearted individual.
Yes.
He's going to treat people right. Blah blah blah. And, if he'd have been governor of Florida, would have
Yeah.
been broke
God.
10 times over by
Yeah.
now. with
Did you
this
see
COVID stuff.
the Project Veritas? You ever watch their stuff, Project Veritas?
Not heard of it.
Oh man, you gotta watch some of their stuff. They do a bunch of undercover stuff. Well,
Oh yeah, they're the ones about selling the baby parts in California.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah. They got Gilliam's campaign manager, mixed up all kind of garbage on there. It always blows my mind. Like, how do these people just say all this crap, man?
Yeah.
It's like, why? Because especially if you're running a campaign like that, you don't trust anybody.
You say the least.
Exactly. And
Oh,
this
Veritas
guy
gets them. I
Yes.
mean, they got insiders that do this.
Yeah.
So they think that they think you're on their team.
That's because no one can resist blowing their own horn, you know.
That's it.
You're right.
Oh man, look what we did to these
I mean, look at
guys.
Biden, you know, when he was over there, yeah, I told that prosecutor that,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, I was gonna, you know.
How right, and yet they
Cuomo.
still won't, they won't even listen to that. It's like, oh, that doesn't
And
mean
they, like I said,
anything.
they
Are
got
you kidding me?
Cuomo, you know,
Yeah.
his own lady or whatever she
Yeah,
was.
she was one of his aides, one of the staff.
Assistant, some kind of assistant, yeah.
And that's what is gonna end up sinking him, is her.
Well, I'm worried about her, is if she's gonna have a job when this is over with.
Might find her hanging herself
I
on a
was
cell
gonna say,
somewhere.
Yeah, you know, he threatened that,
Yeah,
what is it,
Assemblyman
council,
or whatever it was,
assemblyman,
yeah.
yeah, councilman.
Really? I
Yeah,
didn't see that.
That
oh, that was on the
Kim or
phone.
something his name is?
Yeah.
Said he was bathing his daughters and he got a phone call and the governor was screaming out
Oh,
on the
yeah,
phone.
told him what he was gonna do to him.
He was gonna destroy his life.
Yeah,
And,
his career would be over and
I
all
hope he
that stuff.
recorded that.
no, he's a Democrat.
Yeah.
He's one of the Democrats in New York that's trying to get Cuomo impeached.
Good.
Yeah.
Needed to be done. And now that there's 10 different entities with nuclear bombs, they're going to go. So
It would have been
maybe
better to cut a deal with the Soviet Union and just leave them alone.
hindsight's 20/20, huh?
But they didn't learn from that though. I mean, look at the Middle East.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
I mean, it was better having Gaddafi in Libya than what the
Well,
hell's going on.
now, yeah.
You know, better having
Saddam over there, or what it was.
Yeah, some of them, yes,
Saddam
Hussein.
should have been left in
Yeah.
place. All these things we learned too late. Huh?
Oh, yeah.
Hindsight's
You're
20/20.
right.
But that's what I mean. It wasn't hindsight because we already seen how it happened in the Soviet Union.
Mm.
You know, we seen what happened in Afghanistan. We pulled out too early back in the '80s. You know, Charlie Wilson's war. You know that whole.
Yeah, Charlie Wilson. Yeah.
So,
I wonder how
Never learned.
accurate that movie is.
Never seen. Well, part of why we don't learn is we shift policy about every 8 years.
Yeah,
You go through a president with one direction of policy, and then all these people say, "Oh, this is great." All these other nations jump on and say, "This is the place we want to go." Or the ones that want to go that route join in there, and then 8 years comes in, we're all tired of that guy, and we shift over to a whole other party and a whole other policy,
Well, the next
and the
Republican,
whole world shifts.
say DeSantis or even Trump wins in 2024, all this stuff rejoining the Paris peace, whatever, and the World Health Organization and the Iranian nuclear, all that stuff we wipe back off. So it's like Trump gets rid of it, Biden reinstates it, the next guy comes in, gets rid of it.
I know, this is why I need to be in charge of the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Because I think if I can have this thing and run it for 50 years, well, live it. But I'll pass it to the family. I'll have Kim Jong Alex
There you
take
go.
over after me.
Kim Jong Alex, yeah.
And we run this thing for 50 years. We have a consistent policy. We could do a whole lot better, but
That's
I would
never
know
gonna
better
happen.
than these other people that are
That's
trying to
never
run
gonna
stuff
happen.
back and forth. They keep going
I
back.
think I told y'all that a genealogist traced who would be king right now in the United States if Washington had accepted the offer to be king.
Really?
He didn't have any children. He had two
Right.
stepchildren, but his brother had children. So somebody traced down like the guy that would be king right now if that had happened. And it's some dude, I forget what I think the first article I read, he was in Texas somewhere. He's an electrician or some crap. And he didn't know. It's like, you'd be king right now. And he's like, what?
You really want some money.
What?
What?
King Ralph, you know?
Oh man, I like that.
Yeah,
I love that movie.
some third-rate guy.
Yeah, it'd be some dude hanging out in the VFW getting drunk every day.
Exactly, yeah.
Hey,
But I'd rather have that when we got now. We got a real person in there. You know?
Yeah, well, that's true, that's true. Third rate or not.
Oh, God.
Well, with no consistent policy, we're stuck. So if you guys want to get this fixed, be sure I get appointed as king.
more roads and better bridges, more bridges and whatever.
Yeah,
Chicken in every pot.
That would take a monarch.
Gotta go around holding hands and shaking babies to get elected.
Let me ask y'all this. Each one of y'all, who is y'all's all-time favorite political leader?
George Washington.
Mickey Mantle.
Oh, but in our lifetime, how about in our lifetime?
In our lifetime.
Okay, we can do that.
And that's been a long life. Well, there you got a long life. So, who would be your favorite political leader in your life?
Jefferson.
In your lifetime.
Well, that's
Oh,
in his
in my
lifetime.
lifetime. Oh, he did do it. He was probably
That
Reagan.
is right.
Reagan.
Come on.
I like that. He started out, campaigning 4 years before the election.
Well, he tried to get the nomination in '76 and he didn't get it, so.
I remember coming out with this really neat stuff that I happen to agree with. You know. So he was my favorite.
Well, I would say he would be in the running for my favorite. He may be my favorite. There's probably two that I think are my favorites. One was actually Nixon. I think, except for that one mistake Nixon made.
It was a hell of a mistake.
Well, it wasn't that big compared to anything Obama did. Obama did 60 times worse.
Good point.
It is nothing.
I don't think
compared to
Nixon knew about Watergate before it
what
happened.
he didn't.
He just
He
knew about
covered
it in
it
the
up,
cover-up
and he
section.
tried to cover up because he stood by his team. His people screwed up. Well, I don't want them to get burned because of that. So he tried to save them, and it burned himself, burned down the bridges, and frankly, that one thing cost America from that point to now, which has been what, 50 years almost? 50 years of bad policy because Nixon got blown away on that one point.
Yeah.
And then had he not been blown away, things would have been a
And
whole
plus,
lot different.
Gerald Ford, by pardoning him, that cost him the election against Carter, because Ford would have, I think, would have been a good president.
I like Ford.
His year and a half, he was good, and I think if he could have gone 4 more years,
Yeah,
he would
Ford would have been great, but Nixon blew that, outside of that point that he blew away the next 50 years by getting kicked out, Nixon was great except for destroying America. And then Reagan, Reagan was, I think, he had more political savvy, or I guess what I'm trying to say is his philosophy of governance was more solid than anybody since, because he spent like 30 years developing and speaking and talking about conservatism, and it all was in his head and how things should work.
Well, plus he was an actor. He knew how to get his point.
I like Reagan.
He
That was
great
the
in
first
music.
election I voted in, the first national election I was old enough to vote in. I voted for him. But I think once he got shot, that he was never the same after that. I really don't. I think he had more energy
Yeah.
beforehand.
Yeah.
And then once he got that, I mean, he was, 68 when he got shot, and that took a lot out of him.
Yeah.
I mean, he almost died, basically.
I think you get back to your, I think I guess favorite, I don't know what, I admired JFK. He was a Democrat, he was involved in a lot of stuff, but I love to hear him talk.
Oh, he was a great orator.
Oh, I love to hear him
One
talk.
of the best.
I still love going back and watching some of his speeches. He was a
Oh.
Had he survived, I think we would have been a lot better off overall, because Johnson was a disaster.
Oh
Yeah,
my
that's
God,
right.
yes.
I'm not a fan of Kennedy, but it's the
I
family
wish they
as a
would have
whole.
followed
Yeah,
up
yeah.
with Kennedy, you know, when his inauguration speech,
Yeah.
ask not what your country can do for
Yes,
you, but what
yes.
you can do for your country.
Good
I
call.
like
Good
that.
call.
Well, you already did your share. You don't have to do any more. We're taking you paid your.
I'll tell you something about JFK though. He suffered from Addison's disease, and which is one of the reasons he was wearing a back brace the day he was shot.
Yeah.
And there are doctors that have said that he would have died within a few years anyway. Like if he had gotten reelected in '64, he may not have lived out that term
Huh.
because he was very sick.
Even
He had
so,
been on his deathbed 2 or 3 times before the assassination, before he was president.
but possibly Johnson might not have been elected, except Johnson was such a politician, he was gonna win no matter what next time, right? That guy could snatch votes out of the grave.
Well, Johnson was Senate Majority Leader during his first term in the Senate.
That's true, yeah.
His very first
Yeah.
term in the Senate, he was Senate Majority Leader.
Yeah.
That's
I
unheard of.
remember
Johnson,
when he
amazing.
first got elected in there, and he drove his car up there, and he parked in the speaker's parking spot. And he'd never been elected before, and they're like, "What the hell are you doing? This is speaker. You gotta have some credit, political credit." He said, "Well, keep my car there, and not go get me some." And I'm like,
Okay.
"What the heck? Who the hell this guy think he is?" Type of deal. And what y'all think? Let's take a walk real quick.
Oh.
Oh my.
You think Johnson played a role in the Kennedy thing?
No.
A lot of people
No.
did, but I don't think so.
I'll tell you right now who shot Kennedy, Lee Harvey Oswald. Cut and dry, period, end of statement.
I
Well,
think he's
I'm
right.
not, I'm not saying, I'm just, you know what I'm saying, cause there's so many damn
know.
theories.
And that's the
out
whole
there.
reason. You know, I've got an 800-page book at home that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the mafia killed Kennedy. I got another book, a little shorter, that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt the Cubans did it.
Right,
And I got another
Yeah.
I got another book, 1,500 pages, that claims beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Secret Service did it.
yeah,
You know, all these cottage industry popped up. Everybody's making money off the death of a president.
yep.
Oswald did it.
And it's
There's a
usually-
lot. It's
Well, I think the reason,
Unassailable.
unassailable evidence that Oswald did it.
yeah,
On his own.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
if I can add to that, I was gonna add something, and now I forgot what it was.
well, I think the reason a lot of people, you know, they question it is because
That's right.
of a couple simple, couple things, you know. People think, well, look,
Can't elect you on that.
the magic bullet theory, you know, people
There's no
look
such
for,
thing though.
right, but what I'm
No
saying,
such
is, you
thing.
know, this people when they look for reasons because they don't want to believe.
Well-
the truth. But usually we all know the thing that happens usually is the most simplest thing.
That's
the real
the-
reason it happened.
Exactly.
You know, but of
Boil
course,
it down to one person, his intent, and that's all it was.
But when a crisis does happen,
Oh yeah.
the person that steps in and takes advantage of it the quickest
Okay.
is the one that wins.
and see,
And this is where it's all about you, and it's happening now.
yep. But see, and that's another reason a lot of people think that, you know, there was something because the way Johnson immediately and made his
Oh, yeah.
wife come on the plane with him and do it all that, and then immediately
He's a
Vietnam
fast thinker. He
escalated.
could see everything happen.
Yeah.
He was a smart
Well, they
man.
had to. I mean,
I mean, you're supposed to, you know.
the thing that also was when the Kennedy guys refused to let Kennedy's body stay in Dallas for the autopsy, which it was a murder committed in Dallas. The Dallas district attorney had authority over what happened to the body. Washington, D.C. had no role whatsoever to snatch his body and take it back to D.C. That was illegal. It never should have happened that way. They did it so fast, and they just kind of buffaloed the locals to get him on the airplane and get him back to D.C.
Yeah.
So,
See, that's why a lot of people, I think there's so many opportunities for people's mind to wonder. That's why I think it's gotten that way. Like I said, from the magic bullet to
yeah, and you know, that's the thing too, that movie JFK, that where they had Kevin Costner stand up there as
the attorney,
a prosecutor of Garrison.
New
That
Orleans.
he said, well, the bullet came in, then it stopped and made a turn, and then when it stopped, that's all BS. And it did not happen like that. But people watch JFK, it's a movie, and they think it's a documentary because of the way it was filmed.
Right.
Let me tell you something. Governor Connolly was sitting on a jump seat. He was 4 inches lower, and he was like 6 inches to the left of Kennedy. I mean, not all the way to the left, but
Right.
offset. The bullet came through. It did exactly a straight line. All those wounds were directly in a line, except for after it hit Connolly's ribs and it deflected into his wrist, and it bounced off his wrist and went into his leg. Before that, it was a straight line from the rifle from the window. But people,
They look right.
they come up with this magic bullet thing
Yeah.
out of thin air because they don't understand. They think Connolly's sitting the same level and directly in front of Kennedy, which he wasn't. You know, Kennedy was sitting in the back seat.
I didn't know that. I
Yeah,
didn't
Johnson
know
was
that.
sitting on a jump seat.
Okay.
You
See,
know,
I didn't know that. But see, that's why a lot of people they and I think another reason is he was so loved that people just don't want to believe that.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So they
that adds to it because if Kennedy's up here and Oswald's some little nobody down
Yeah.
here,
Exactly.
how does this little nobody take out a Kennedy? You
Yeah,
know,
and
it's
then
like-
of course you have the Vietnam escalating soon after, and then not only that, you have Oswald going to the Russian embassy and all that. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you wanted to, come up with
You could build a
conspiracy,
case.
Absolutely, you could.
Well, there was another thing too. They said he wasn't alone because how many bullets were there?
There was three.
Three. He couldn't fire in that
He's
short.
short, They've
but-
done it.
Yeah,
They
they
duplicated.
that's okay.
Mythbusters, one of the shows they on the History Channel they've done that.
it. See, that was if all the wounds, the so-called magic bullet,
Right.
if you say that could not have been done with one steel jacketed bullet,
Right.
then there had to have been 2 shots that took care of it. Well, then there wouldn't have been time for those 2 shots to be fired by one rifle.
Chocolate.
But if one bullet created all those wounds, then you had
this down here and hit.
he had like
Well,
8
yeah.
he had like 8 seconds to fire
Thank you.
3 shots.
Anybody else
No,
want to
I've had too many
Ah,
already.
thank you.
All right.
So anyway,
Jim wanted.
Jim won't.
I'll tell you
Sorry
another
about
thing.
that.
Oswald was working at the school book depository, and
Thank you.
he normally
I
went.
forgot about that, yeah.
He normally went out to Irving, Texas to visit his wife on weekends, and he would catch a ride on Fridays.
Janitor, wasn't he up there?
Well, he was working in the book depository, filling orders and stuff. He'd get a clipboard and go fill a book order.
Oh, okay, I thought, okay.
So, he would normally go out to the weekend to Irving to visit his wife. He wasn't living with his wife. His wife was living with some friends. And he lived in a boarding house across the river from downtown Dallas. So anyway, when the paper published Kennedy's route through the city, Oswald went home on Thursday. He caught a ride on Thursday instead of Friday, because Friday Kennedy was coming. And he spent the night. He argued with Marina. When he got up in the morning, he left his ring and his money on the table next to the bed. He went out in the garage and he got his rifle. And it was broken down into, I think, 30-something inches long. Anyway, he wrapped it up in paper, and he took it and he put it in the back seat of the car, the guy he was riding with. And when the guy asked him what it was, he said it was curtain rods for his room, his boarding house. So anyway, he broke his whole routine. He went home on Thursday to make sure he had the rifle in place for when Kennedy came by. Okay, when the shots were fired, there were 3 guys eating lunch directly under him on the next floor down. They heard the shots. They heard the ejection of the shells when he was operating the bolt action.
Right.
They heard the shells hit the floor, and they were leaning out the window looking up, and they saw the rifle barrel. And there was a guy named Howard Brennan who was in the street directly below the window looking up at it. He's the one that gave the cops the description of Oswald, because he saw him fire the shots. And of course, the conspiracy theorists say, "Oh, that's all BS." He was in on it with them. All this.
And then of course you got Oswald saying, "I'm a patsy," and of course he's going to say that. You just shot the daggone president.
Oswald was a wacko. I mean,
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
and he was raised by a wacko. His mother was even worse than he was. And
But the grassy knoll,
yeah, it was BS.
Zapruder film,
What's the Bruder film? What does it show? It shows him get hit.
the grassy knoll.
Yeah,
Doesn't show the grassy knoll.
Oh, it doesn't?
Not the Zapruder film.
Oh.
was there a grassy knoll?
He was pointing away from the grassy knoll. It was behind Zapruder.
Oh.
And seeing, then you got people out there, they interviewed that one guy and his wife with a little kid that said, "I heard a shot come on my shoulder." Well, the thing is you're in a bowl right there. The shot's going to echo, so.
The subsequent acoustic experiments prove that the echo in that place is crazy.
Right, but see, Colin, I was thinking because, being in the bowl right there for one, that echo, you're just gonna bounce off everything, so of course you're gonna think it could've came behind you or whatever, unless you seen it directly.
And the other thing was Jack Ruby, who killed Oswald.
Yeah.
He was a hit man himself, to keep Oswald from talking and telling about the truth.
Let me tell you about Jack Ruby now.
Oh boy.
5 minutes before he shot Oswald,
Yeah.
a whole 5 minutes before, he was at a Western Union office sending $25 to one of his strippers.
Oh my God.
And he left there and he walked toward the police where they were doing the transfer.
Across this stuff?
There's a show, the reason I thought it was because of the History Channel show they done.
He's walking down there. He wants to watch the transfer because he's one of these cop fanatics, and he was in on all this crap. But he had 2 dogs that he treated as children. He had no wife and kids. He had these 2 little dachshunds. Well, they were in his car on the street. If Ruby was going to go down and knowingly kill Oswald and maybe get killed himself, he wouldn't have brought his dogs with him and left them in his car. And also, when he shot Oswald, Ruby walked up at the same moment Oswald was walking out. He pulled the gun and shot him. It was all impulsive. It wasn't like he was laying in wait.
Yeah.
He walked up at the same time Oswald was coming out, and he just pulled the gun and shot him.
Right.
Man, there's crazy people everywhere. And I'm surprised.
Ruby was certifiable.
How many people are insane at our table?
No,
Ruby
1 in
was-
10 is insane.
Ruby was certifiable, though.
Not 10 here.
Yeah, I know
See, and that show on the History Channel, the JFK files, where I learned a lot of it, and like you saw about Ruby, that guy had some issues.
Oh, yeah.
And, the strip club and all that stuff.
Jacob Rubenstein from Chicago.
And,
And
well, they
also-
probably would qualify to serve in government now.
No, sure.
He'll
Yeah.
probably be president now,
Yeah, but also, there was in the late '70s there was a commission on the assassination RFK, JFK, and Martin Luther King, there was a commission in Congress to investigate all these. Well, almost at the very last day of the JFK investigation, they had already determined that Oswald acted alone. On one of the very last days, somebody brought in this audio recording, and supposedly you could hear a fourth shot.
And motorcycle recording?
But they said that this was proof there was a second shooter. And I think one of the men's magazines, We Magazine or whatever, they had actually made a little record and attached it to their magazine so you could play it on your home stereo. I remember that. But anyway, months and months later, after the report came out saying there may have been a second shooter, some people that really went and investigated this and actually used some scientific evidence. They determined that sound that they interpreted as a shot was actually recorded on a motorcycle cop's stuck microphone who was over at Parkland Hospital when the shooting happened. It wasn't a gun at all. It was some other noise. But he wasn't even in Dealey Plaza. But that's the proof that they used to show that there was a second shooter on a guy that wasn't even in Dealey Plaza. He was over at Parkland Hospital for crowd control and traffic control. Because that's where Kennedy, it wasn't far off his route so they went there anyway.
I remember that. It was a backfire that they had on that.
It was either Parkland or he was at the Trade Mart where, I think he was at the Trade Mart where Kennedy was going to give a speech. I think that's where it was. Anyway, that's...
Sorry about that. I just wanted, everybody's thoughts on that. But,
Well, I know Jimmy Carter's not my favorite president.
No.
And,
not at all.
No, well,
I like Rand Paul.
You guys, y'all were alive when...
Oh, he's a favorite politician, I thought you said.
Oh, president.
President?
No.
Well, if we'd have stuck to that little nickels, our gas would be the price it is now.
That's true.
Yeah.
We stuck to what?
Jimmy Carter's double nickel. Everybody going.
He tried to fix the price of oil, and that's why the oil shortage hit, because he tried to mandate what the price of oil was going to be. You can't do that.
Well, actually, Ford kind of started that trend. He started doing a little bit of price fixing, or what do you call it? Price controls. And that was wrong move entirely.
And the most expensive, the highest price we've ever paid for gasoline in this country was 1981 or 82. That's the highest we've ever paid. It's a lot cheaper than that right now than it was then. The inflation.
Well, you got to figure inflated price, So
y'all brought up Ford. What was, you said, he could have been your favorite one.
Could have been mine.
What was so wonderful about Mr. Gerald?
Well, he held a fist against, things were crumbling in Cambodia, for instance, in Vietnam because of the end of the war. The Democrats pulled the rug out from under Vietnam. We were giving them some arms and helping them supply themselves so they could fight their own war. And the Democrats took over and pulled the rug out from under Vietnam, and they just folded in 1975. Meanwhile, right after that, there was like Cambodia and what do they call that? The Mayaguez. And Ford was quick to go in there and stop that. He wasn't going to play around with it and not mess with it. And he sent that force in there.
Hey, when I worked helicopters at Hurlburt Field, they had some old 53 the slick models, and they were using the Mayaguez, and they still had the bullet holes. On the inside, you could see where the bullet holes were. They'd been patched on the outside. But if you're on the inside, you looked at the fuselage, you could see where some bullet holes where they got shot by a small arms fire.
Yeah.
They were still using them in the 80s.
Well, anyway, so he wasn't afraid to do a little bit of direct action still in the face of having just pulled out of Vietnam, which was a tough thing to do. You're out of there. Now, you don't want to go start something else.
Right.
But the Mayaguez thing was a little different. You get pirates and this kind of stuff involved. They needed to tamp that down in a hurry.
Yeah, but Ford also had a tendency to trip and fall too.
Yeah.
He was a football player out of Michigan.
One of the first great Saturday Night Live skits was Chevy Chase falling down the steps.
I remember that.
Pretty good, like Gerald Ford, he slipped down the steps of Air Force One. So every time Chevy Chase would be on there in the first year of Saturday Night Live, he was only on there 1 year. All his skits were
The thing is, Ford would have been so much better than Carter had he had his rest of his
Anybody.
time in there.
He would have been better than Carter.
Total loss.
Good.
He would have
peanut
been better than
farmer.
Carter.
I would have been better than. Oh, I would have been better than Carter. I would have. Anybody, I would have.
Now, what was, now that brings my next one. How in the heck did Carter win?
As a result of Nixon.
Nixon.
They were gonna put a Democrat in office.
Yeah, it was because of Nixon and Carter, frankly, had a very warm personality.
He was, yeah, he was.
He was
also-
opposite of Nixon.
He was also an outsider, supposedly.
He was a clean cut peanut farmer.
He was a good speaker until he
Yeah.
got into office. Because I had him over at the country club I was president of. And he gave a really nice speech, but he was stop and go and stutter and everything after he got elected. He just seemed like a
Because he
different
was
person.
worried about what he was saying on the national stage, I guess.
What
He was
was his,
also a micromanager. You know,
What
he
was
didn't-
his-
He didn't delegate.
what was his
Kinda
daughter's
Johnson.
name?
Same way.
Kinda
Johnson was like that, a micromanager.
Johnson? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nick,
What was,
Carter was too.
Oh, God.
Jimmy Carter's daughter's name?
Yeah, her.
Amy?
Amy, yeah.
I would ask Amy what I would do. He said something like that, you know, and he'd talk to Rosalind and you know, what should I do?
Ask his mom.
Yeah.
Ask his brother.
Yeah. She could-
No,
Well, I got Billy's beer. I got Billy's beer. I got a
My
can.
brother
at home.
actually has a can of it.
Yeah.
Old Billy beer.
Oh, yeah, I had popped it.
Carter's just foreign policy and things, when he shut off soybeans to Russia because of Afghanistan, that automatically shifted all of the USA soybean production to Brazil. They started mowing down the rainforest to grow soybeans to supply Russia. And that was the start of the great exchange of grain and trade with Russia to South America. And the American farmers went into a tailspin for about 10 years it took them.
Carter's
They
also.
never really quite recovered from that until they started subsidizing ethanol. And then when they subsidize ethanol, now the land up in the Midwest is worth.
Yeah.
But you had to subsidize ethanol to do that. Now corn is the big deal up there.
Carter's also the one that started the process of giving up control of the Panama Canal, which now the Chinese control, by the way.
Mhm.
The Panama Canal was the other thing.
Yeah,
He just,
you read that book.
and now the Chinese, yeah, that book.
He ended the B-1 bomber at the time, the B-1A that they were developing. He put an end to that. Reagan brought that back, which good for him.
Turned out to be useful in a couple of cases.
They didn't use it in the Gulf War though.
No,
They did not use the B-1 at all.
well, the stealth bomber was so much more.
Yeah,
efficient.
no, they said, and I don't think this is true, but somebody told me later, and I don't believe this is true, but it's interesting. They said, this person told me that they didn't use the B-1 because they were holding them in reserve, because intelligence was saying that some of the other Arab countries were going to enter the war on the side of Iraq, including Egypt. So they had these B-1s and ready to hit other targets. But then I read later that the B-1s were grounded at the time for some kind of maintenance thing, which could have been a cover story, I don't know. But anyway, they weren't using the first Gulf War, so who knows why, the real
But
reason.
yeah, Carter's sense of foreign policy was really stupid.
Like Biden's.
And this is the case with Biden as well. The sense of foreign policy is so stupid.
Well,
What's
Democrats.
his name came out, Biden's one of Biden's best friends, and he's been in, one of the top advisors for the last couple presidents. And he literally came out and said that every decision Biden has ever made on foreign policy has been the wrong decision.
Yeah, that's true. But hey, to be fair, Bush did
Oh,
not do too
he
well. I
dropped
think
the ball.
Bush 1 probably did reasonably well on foreign policy, but Bush 2
2 was mainly, I
Bad.
mean, was Cheney was running the show.
Cheney was
behind
running
there.
the show, and that was Bush 2's problem. He didn't have the mental capacity to handle all this stuff, and Cheney was basically his foreign policy guy, which was a bad choice.
Well, yeah, but in defense of Bush too, I think if it hadn't been for 9/11, that his administration would have done more better. He was going to privatize part of Social Security, where you could actually invest your own money the way you wanted to. That was in his plan. That all got
Yeah, he
side.
had several things like that.
There was a few things that I liked about him in the beginning, but that all kind of went by the wayside once the whole
Well,
9/11 and,
Yeah.
you know, the
Plus,
invasion, all that.
he could throw a perfect pitch.
Oh, actually,
Oh,
hey,
man.
you noticed that when Obama was in office, he went to throw the
Oh,
first pitch? They didn't show it.
Oh, they didn't show the
No,
first
they
pitch?
did not show it on TV.
I thought it
They
was
cut away
Bouncey.
from it. But I saw a replay later, he throws like a girl. And he's like,
That's like Fauci. Fauci threw just the ugliest thing.
I thought Obama bounced one.
well, it was very, you know,
Right.
Well, that right there is a
Yeah,
reason to not be president.
I don't know.
That's
You can't
exactly.
throw a ball.
Hey man, Bush went out there and he nailed it right down the middle.
Had his jacket on.
Of course, he was an owner of the Texas Rangers.
Of course.
He wasn't a stranger to a
He
baseball
wasn't,
diamond.
yeah.
I watched the documentary. ESPN did a thing on that, and it was Yankee Stadium, and he was warmed up in Boston Yankee Stadium in batter's cage, and he was warming up for 30 minutes beforehand. Derek Jeter came down there and said, "Don't bounce it, they'll boo you," and
He said,
Yeah.
what?
don't bounce it, they will boo you.
Oh.
And so him and Derek Jeter stood there and
Oh, boy.
booed. So he was throwing with Derek Jeter and went out
What,
there. And
didn't he do it from the rubber, not from
Yeah,
the
he
front?
did it. He did it the real distance.
Yeah, the real
60
distance,
feet,
okay.
6 inches.
Yeah,
Yep.
a lot of them get in front of the mound.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was
I was
perfect.
watching that baseball documentary the other day, just for one of the episodes, and that Ken Burns did. And they had Franklin Roosevelt throw out the first pitch, and he made a comment later. He said like, this was my ninth opening day pitch or something like that, because he'd been in office.
3 times.
This is my ninth opening day or something. It was pretty funny the way
Oh,
he said it
good.
for FDR. And you know, the 7th inning stretch, I was President Taft. He got up to stretch his legs in the 7th inning.
Oh, is that where this comes from?
Everybody else stood up
Taft.
because he was the
My
president.
I didn't know that.
300-pound president. He got up to stretch his legs. I don't blame him.
Yeah.
And the rest of the crowd around him all stood up.
Yeah.
He's the one that also got stuck in the bathtub, isn't he?
No, I don't know. Never heard
Yeah,
of that.
Well,
Taft, he was
yeah.
a pretty big guy.
He got
Yeah,
stuck
they-
in the bathtub, and they had the fire department, they had to come in and get him out of the bathtub. In the White House.
You know, Grover Cleveland, when he was president, he had secret cancer surgery. They took him out on the presidential yacht out in the Potomac River and did cut out part of the roof of his mouth for cancer.
Oh, my God.
And Teddy Roosevelt used to swim naked in the Potomac. He would go out walking, to the reserve there, whatever it was by, get all hot and sweaty, and then strip down butt naked and start swimming in the
TR was
Potomac.
cool.
Oh, I love Teddy, man.
He was a
That
rough
my-
rider.
That was my favorite president right
He
there.
was, an impressive
The
person.
reason I like him because he's a man's man, you know,
Yeah.
and he did it all from boxing, to wrestling, to fighting. They tried to jump into World War, and they had a petition and everything, and it never got to go. And his son got killed over there.
His other son got killed in World War II. Well, he didn't get killed, he died of a heart attack in Normandy.
Really? I didn't know that.
TR went out to North Dakota at one point to go on a cattle ranch. And when he showed up out there, he was this Eastern dandy with his glasses and his fancy ways, and the cowboys were like making fun of him and stuff. But by the time he left, they all respected him and they all loved him because he was like, they had made these preconceived notions about Roosevelt, but once he was out there and with them and actually showing that he would do his part, and they all turned 100% around, 180 degrees around on him. They all loved him.
See that? I wish I would meet him.
You know, his mother and his wife both died on the same day.
Yep, I've done on one of my American VA series. I've done TR, and that was one I didn't know that till I've done that series. I've done one the other day, and I hope you guys will like. I haven't been able to get up because we had some family
They have
issues.
medicine for that,
Oh, God. This is true. But no, we got it done.
That just,
That
that
just
ain't right.
there out of it all right there. No, but
Edit that part, okay?
but
Wow.
no, I haven't been able to put it on the internet yet. It's done and everything, but we had some family issues. My wife's little cousin passed away, and
I read that, I'm so sorry. He seemed awfully young.
22,
What happened?
drugs.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Opioid overdose.
I believe, I don't know, I don't wanna say, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But from what I understand, it was opiates. And,
I've got some cousins, same thing happened to that.
you know,
It's a tragedy.
it's, you know, opioids it's bad news, man, and, you know, it blows my mind, you know. Of course, when I was younger, a little younger in high school and all that, you know, it was always, you know, football games and all that, so we had partying, drink some beers, and, you know, typical kids and everything, but I got to where, you know, I hated alcohol, you know, and didn't want anything to do with any of the drugs and all that, because luckily I was one of the ones who could see what it does to people and everything, and it always blows my mind, why? People, you know what it's gonna do to you, you know where the stuff leads, and people do it anyway.
You do it anyway. Well, once you try it, from what I've read, it's so good. The experience is so wonderful. You have to do it a second time.
Well, no, you
And then a third.
this is true.
So many people get involved because of their friends. They don't want to be on the outside looking in, they want to be on the inside with everybody else, doing the things that are, the people
I
that,
want to be the clique, the little group.
yeah, it's a clique.
So it's more important who your friends are than just about
This is true, but I believe, you know, I was telling my wife this.
Jimmy, you're gonna have to go.
I'm third rate, I mean, hey.
Mike, you're gonna have at least second rate around here.
Yeah.
I was telling my wife, you know, I believe a lot of it, in today's society, people get so offended over the way we look at women and judge women and, you know, certain races, colors, creeds, and everything like that. But yet these same people listen to certain types of music, rap music, and all that, and all they do is downgrade each other. They, you know, talk about women, you know, they talk about how great drugs are and killing and murder and everything. The problem is these people are doing it, you know, they're doing it just to make money and have people buy it. But the problem is these kids out here, and a lot of people hear it and they think this is how
It's the culture.
they think this is how I need to be, I need to do this, and they try to live that lifestyle. They want to live the selling the drug lifestyle, and they want to do the stuff and all that, and they don't see it as, and yet because when you always go to get back to the entertainers, the rappers and all that, and they always say, well, I'm just an entertainer, you know, I'm not telling people to go out and do the drugs and sell and all that, and you know, they should know it's just entertainment, but the problem is they don't, and that to me that's a problem because it starts at the house, in my opinion. You know, the parents should be the ones saying, listen, you know, you listen to this person isn't really doing this stuff right here. You know, this is entertainment. It's not good entertainment, but it's entertainment. And but the thing is they don't do that. They don't teach their kids this stuff, and they live this life, and they literally try to live out songs. They glorify money, and they glorify cars, and they wonder why women.
Well, those two things are okay.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I like cars and.
I do too, but when you sit there and you glorify and you make it to where your whole life's about it, you know, and then you treat women, women dress certain ways and they dress very provocative, and then when men say stuff to them and they pull the whole Me Too card, it's like, wait a minute, here you are listening to Cardi B or all this other stuff and the songs that this lady comes up with, and it blows my mind, you know.
Well,
I wonder why.
I have to admit, certain women at closing time get a better look. I mean,
Well, with my son, I lived the experience that you're talking about. He was at 17, he and the preacher's son took off. They were, they got pissed off at me for some reason or other. And so the preacher's son came back 2 weeks before my son. I get this telephone call about a month later from the police up in Oak Hill, West Virginia, and I know a police sergeant that I was talking to told me that you need to come up here and pick up your son, pay bail, and all that kind of stuff. But this thing, the story goes on. I go up and I pick my son up, and we're coming back, and I'm behind some really slow moving traffic, and I'm waiting. All of a sudden, I saw an opening. I speed out. Next thing I know, we're going down a mountain. And how we got there, I don't know. I remember grabbing my son around the neck, holding him so he wouldn't get hurt. And the car ended up pointing the other direction.
Oh, my God.
I mean, it was okay. But this is one thing. And so then, later on in high school, I gave him a job. And next thing I know, the plant manager came in to me and he said, Dick, he said, I hate to tell you, he said, I don't know how the hell to tell you this, but he said, your son was caught last night. And I said, caught last night doing what? Oh, stealing tires. Why in the hell is he stealing tires? You know, it was to buy drugs. And I mean, he was on drugs from the time that he ran away with the minister's son until that. And so he took his life in Christmas Eve, 1999. He went out and he hung himself. And he abhorred pain. This is the thing that Dean and I could never get our heads wrapped around this thing, because he hated pain so damn much.
Yeah. You know, talking about the opioids, I personally, I was addicted to opioids. I got cut out of the prison up there. You know, I never taken anything like that. Of course, in high school did stuff. Everybody would do the drugs and all that stupid stuff. I was young and stupid, but I never took them constantly. You know what I mean? Until I got my prescription for them. That's how I got into it. And I
You got a
became,
prescription and it got you hooked.
yep, I became addicted to it. You know, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I would buy them off the streets, young and stupid in high school and all that. And so I knew what they were, but I never was. I could take one or two here and there, no problem. But when I actually got a prescription, when I was prescribed, I was taking them, and then that's when, like you said, your body, it makes you feel so wonderful. You feel no pain. You literally. You're in a wonderful mood, you feel good, you're happy, you know, it makes you feel like $1 million, it really does. But, and then the problem is your body builds a tolerance up to it and stuff. And so you end up having to take more, and you take more, and you take more, and before you know it, it's game, set, match. And
Hibiscus esculentus doesn't do quite that.
Well, okra, if it's pickled, will possibly.
Local weed will do that.
There's a good limited TV series called The Pharmacist, and it's about this guy down toward New Orleans, St. Bernard Parish. His son got killed in the Ninth Ward in a drug deal. He drove in to do a deal and he got shot and killed. Well, anyway, this pharmacist, he doesn't listen to these detectives. He ends up basically breaking the case and solving his son's murder. But then he goes on from there because he's realized how bad the opioid academic, whatever, was getting. And he found a doctor there on Chef Highway in New Orleans that was basically just writing prescriptions for opioids and getting paid very well for it. And that was all she wouldn't even examine it. She had all these pre-filled out prescriptions that they would just fill in the name of the and his pharmacist was filling some of these prescriptions, and he got suspicious about it, and he started investigating. Well, they ended up bringing this woman down later for all these. I mean, the whole show was about how many prescriptions this woman was. How many prescriptions this woman was writing is ridiculous.
I was in Vietnam, you know.
We're talking about that. Go ahead, Dick, I'm sorry.
Yeah, did you experience the same thing I did? That's what we're talking about, but what I'm really getting at is the drug thing. What did you find out about the drugs? Was it from your experience in Nam, or?
I didn't come across it. Marijuana was the only thing, and I smoked marijuana one time, and that's it. But the drugs, I didn't know anybody who took it, or the marijuana I did know. And
Well, when I came across it, I was in Korea, and at first, I thought that the Chinese were really damn good fighters. And they would do anything. Okay, then later on, when I'm a platoon leader, get some prisoners, and we're interrogating them. And what came out of this interrogation was, these Chinese were afraid to attack and fight the Marines. The only way they could get around that was they had a survival pack, and they had one little place here, and every time they would fight the Marines, I mean, they would get higher than the Georgia pine, and I mean, you couldn't stop them. And you have to be crazy like that, because, and a lot of people don't understand, they thought that the Chinese would send their troops in and give them enough weapons for every man to have. And the first 4 or 5 waves that would come in, hell, they had weapons, but everybody else had ammo, no weapons. So they picked one up.
Wow.
Well, I was told by guys that were there in Vietnam that worked aircraft maintenance that they were given speed, because they'd be doing these heavy sorting, heavy sorties, quick turning, and they had to work, like maybe 24 hours, and they said they were coming down and formally given speed to take, so they wouldn't have to sleep.
I interrupted you, go ahead.
I wish I had some of that on the ship. There's times that I used to be dead tired, and you'd be on watch, and just wait and hope that watch get over where you could go hit the side for 5 minutes till the next go around.
Well, something along that same line, there were times when we would go 48 hours without any sleep, and we came down to one. I remember seeing this one guy in my platoon, and I saw him pull a pin on a grenade, but he's holding it, the spoon, so he's not going to throw the damn thing. I said, Corporal, I said, what in the hell are you doing? And he said, Lieutenant, he said, I don't think I can keep my eyes open any longer. And he said, I know that I'm holding this grenade. If I let go of the pin, it's going to blow me up. And so this should keep me from
motivator.
Passing out.
Not only am I going to kill myself, but these guys standing around me, they're going to get hurt too.
Well, we were never close. Now, the closest guys were 100 yards that way.
He was all by himself?
Hey, that's a Marine for you. I mean,
How many guys died that way?
and one guy in our platoon did. I mean, it was a damn mess.
Let me ask you this, I don't know the answer. You see it on the movies and stuff like that, so I don't know how true it is, but I've never held a grenade. Is it true that if you hold a grenade, you pull the pin out, as long as you keep it held and you put the pin back in?
You're okay.
Okay, so
Can you
that's
actually
true.
Oh yeah. See, that's why you pull the pin. But you don't want to let go of the damn spoon, because the spoon is you have
That activates the timer.
Yeah, okay, because you got 3 to 5 seconds. I hear this story. Well, before you throw the grenade, count to 2 or 3. Hell, you're going to get blown up. Throw that sucker.
throw it down in the movie.
Yeah, see, but you know what I'm talking about in the movies.
Yeah,
They'll hold it,
exactly.
they'll hold the spoon, they'll pull the pin, and then they'll like, if you don't do this, I'll let it go, but they do it and they put the pin back in and they let go. So that is
Well,
true.
see, you hit the head of the nail right on top of the head, when you said in the movies.
Right,
Because that, you don't
can do
have
anything.
combat like that. I mean, it is, that's a fictitious thing.
Right.
So, what I remember the first time, I volunteered to go on a patrol, and this took me a few days, and so I'm going on the patrol, but before we go, we get our assignment, what we're going to do, and so we have our code name and everything, and so in case we get separated, we get back safely. And so as we pass through our line, I thought, well, when are we going to get down on our hands and knees and crawl? Well, I said, that was stupid, because, I mean, hell, sometimes we're out walking for an hour, hours, I mean, you couldn't crawl on your knees that damn long.
3 or 4 miles on your knees would be kind of rough.
Yeah. That's the way it
But in
goes.
the movies,
And so
they
these
crawl.
guys,
Yeah.
I thought, and the next thing was, hell, there's so damn much noise. I said, everybody about the
Kramer and
Chinese.
Okay, I'll make it and you
Why
People
crawl?
are farting. Oh, shit. You know, I thought, what the hell kind of a war are we fighting? This ain't what I saw in the
Yeah,
movie.
exactly,
You
yeah.
also look like you're about 20 yards over there when you're shooting at these people, and they're really about half a mile.
Yeah, they're
Quarter
further
mile
away.
away. You're not.
Yeah, when we would set up in a fixed position, we knew where the enemy was, so what we would do is aim it toward the enemy, and so you'd fire your weapon, make sure it was working all right. Otherwise, you had, before dark, you wanted to do a job on that, make sure the weapon worked.
Test.
Oh, Dick,
Wow.
I seen on, one of your Facebook things where you said, you saw that elephant. What's that mean?
Oh, that's for me. Okay, if you read The Red Badge of Courage from the Civil War, it's an excellent book by Stephen Crane, Civil War. And actually it's a term that was used among soldiers back then. When they went off to war, somebody said, can you describe what war is like for us? He said, well, what did you see when you went to the circus? He said, well, I saw an elephant. I've never seen that before. And never saw these other strange things going on at the circus, but that elephant was the strangest. Can you describe the elephant for me? He said, well, it's a great big gray thing. And then they said, the next guy asked him a question, well, can you describe the elephant? And he would have a whole different description of the elephant. This other guy over here, he'd never seen an elephant, but his description of the elephant was totally different. But they were all the most strangest thing they'd ever seen, and they all wanted to see the elephant. And the war is the same way. In battle, in combat, every soldier sees a different elephant.
They do, absolutely. And to pick up on what you're saying about you talking to different people, asking them a different question, or the same question, there used to be a TV program really early on, and so they would line up 10 people. And so the guy that was, or woman that was up and in the front, the guy reached over and told this kid or man a story.
Yeah.
And so then it was supposed to be passed on, so he passes it on to the next guy. And so by the time you get to the 10th person, you don't recognize the story at all.
Yeah.
Post office or telephone game.
Oh, that's fun, yeah.
There's a guy, Jamie McMurtry. He's the son of the guy that wrote Lonesome Dove, Larry McMurtry. Anyway, he's got an album, and his first song is called "See the Elephant," and that's what that's about.
It's all about everybody has heard about this elephant. Everybody has heard about it. It's the strangest thing you've ever seen, and everybody wants to see it.
That's just
I
like,
want to see the war. I
that's
want to
just-
see the combat.
that's just like the drunkard.
I don't. One time's enough, I think.
The drunkards,
Yeah.
did you see the pink elephant? Did you see the pink elephant? That's the drunk.
The drunk guys. Yeah, that's a different.
That's a different elephant.
Different metaphor.
Sorry, I just seen that. I wondered what you
Yeah,
meant.
I got it.
What you meant by it.
But if you read the book, Red Badge of Courage by Stephen Crane,
Look at it.
and the interesting thing about the author of that book, he was not in the Civil War. Stephen Crane was too young to be in the Civil War, and when he wrote the book, he was only 19, I think, after the war. But he had talked to so many Civil War veterans, and he wrote a tremendous.
Wasn't he a war correspondent in the Spanish-American War?
I think he was in the Spanish American. I believe he died in Cuba.
Yeah, he died pretty young, I know.
I think he died in Cuba from maybe it was from yellow fever or something. But anyway, Stephen Crane's book, and it's a superb book. Even though he was not a soldier in combat, and he was he was a war correspondent in the
So
Spanish.
it's the red badge of courage, that's your wound. You know, the red badge.
Right.
Yeah, and there's some pretty graphic stuff in there, even though he wasn't. But all this was transposed from people he had talked with and made a great story out of it. There's actually a film I think there's
Maybe
a
some
film.
more cream?
No, that's fine.
You can probably watch it on YouTube. You don't have to read the book. It's condensed.
Well,
Have
if
pictures.
he's got a book, I'd rather read the book first. But yeah, no, go back to like we was talking about the opioid thing. That is a huge, huge problem we have in this country. Like you're talking about, I knew doctors locally that, I'll tell you this right here. I was working at the prison and I was told, go in your uniform, they'll give you whatever you want. So of course, I went in uniform. Sure enough, boom. You know, that's where I saw it firsthand.
Into the prison or into the doctor's
Into
office?
the doctor's office.
Okay.
And
Where you work, they're gonna
What
give you
did you
some
see?
drugs.
Well, how the doctor literally would write what you'd say, like, I'm in severe pain, or, you know, my anxiety's, you know, going, it's crazy, you know, my buddy takes this right here, and I know this works for them, so I wanna try that, you know, and you would basically tell them, and no questions asked, they would write you a prescription for it. And this doctor, from what I understand, he's one of the head guys at Santa Rosa Medical Center now. I don't wanna say his name on camera, but you may know him, but anyway, he was my personal doctor for about 4 years there. And then I also knew of people that what they would do is they would get in a vehicle, they would go to South Florida, down to Miami down there, and they would go to different doctors. And they literally would write the prescription there, they would fill it in the same building, and what they would do is you'd have 4 or 5 people go down there, they'd carpool down there, and they would sell this stuff and make money off of it. That's how, what's the interstate that runs from Miami north?
95?
I-95, it was called the opioid highway.
Yeah.
And that's how it got its name. Florida was very bad on it, so I got to see the whole opioid epidemic firsthand. Thankfully, you know, I was one of the lucky ones that saw it and realized it, like, this is no good, and beat it. And I've known a couple people, but that stuff gets some people to where they can't shake that monkey loose, and it ruins their whole life.
That documentary I was telling you, the pharmacists, they interview one of the regional salespeople of a pharmaceutical company, and how the incentives they were getting, like their top salesman was making almost $1 million a year.
Yeah.
Because they're pushing these opioids and they're giving them to these doctors that just writing prescriptions and getting paid big money. You know, and the pharmaceutical company didn't care because they were making money off of it, so.
Here comes somebody.
That's my wife. That's like, what we was talking about,
Yeah. You'll have to introduce you.
I'll introduce her real quick. I told her to come here early, but no, that's like,
Hi, I've seen your picture.
this is my wife, Sarah.
Hello, Sarah. It's good to meet you.
Everybody.
Nice to meet you.
Hey.
Nice to meet you.
Not quite done yet, but I didn't know what.
No.
No. I didn't know it'll be between 9:30 and 10. So.
Hammer, get a cup of coffee. We want a cup of coffee?
Hang out. All right.
Okay.
Well, sit down and join us.
Well, give her a seat.
We're,
I'll come over here.
we don't require
You wanna go over there with-
any gender reassignment or anything. We accept
Move that stuff out
all
here.
genders. Come over here.
I'm gonna, now that you're here, I'm gonna go out to the truck and see if, if my, other thing is out there, the silver one, where I can actually extend it. I don't know where it would be at. I'm gonna go check, cause if I got that one is, I can actually extend that one up.
It's over with.
Yeah, but,
We're about done. You may as well just stick with what we got.
I don't know, that's right.
Yeah, what time is it anyway? I don't know.
It's 9:45.
Good grief. But we didn't go to 11, we go 3 hours before.
No, not me. I get to go when 10 o'clock hits, I get to go.
Got to go?
You got an appointment?
No, I get home about 10:30 and I can take my nap.
Oh, yeah, you got it figured out now.
I'm on schedule
You,
now.
you don't wanna miss that, right?
You got it, Dick, I mean, shoot.
Sarah, you get involved in this technical aspects of this, making this film?
I'm used to it. I was the one that was taught him all of it.
You taught them the whole thing?
You did it.
You're the
All
brains
right.
on the outfit, huh?
Well, we wondered who the brains were.
Yeah,
That's me.
you gotta have a
I read
tech.
pants relationship. That's it. He's a good deal. But he's really bad with technology.
Well, that's good he got you, because if you're turning out good stuff, that he's got a good format going, and I think you've done a good job.
You gotta have a
So
techie.
we're kind of tickled that you're getting involved in this, because maybe you become the backbones to this whole outfit. We like that.
Don't believe anything
We
she
like
says.
what Tommy's
He's
doing.
giving your job away.
Don't believe anything she says.
She taught you
No,
everything.
she told us about it.
Yeah, we were giving the wrong person credit.
Don't believe anything she says.
Something.
Yeah,
Stick password.
this is, one of the books my dad gave me to read.
It says, to the chief, Blue Eyes from White Buffalo Cat.
I guess that's the guy that wrote it on.
The guy that wrote it.
Aliases.
Jacob
Yeah.
Carter wrote
He's
it.
got me
Yeah.
reading that as part of the thing for
Holy
writing his book. And, remember I told you he's writing, he's doing a book and everything, and I've never written a book, of course, so I need to speak with you about that.
They don't know how to spell.
I can't spell.
I think we've got spell checker nowadays, so that should be good.
I don't know, we had pickled eggs going there for a while.
He uses grammatically, that online, tech thing.
I should, I don't know why it does, it turns on for some things, it don't turn on for others, but I don't know how to work this thing.
It's like, on mine, like when I go post stuff on there, like if I can type 2 letters, and below it'll pop up like 4 or 5 different
Yeah.
words, try to come up with.
Uh-huh.
But I've gotten to where now I use this called that swipe, where I don't even type the letters. Like, say I want to spell like hello, I'll just start at H and then I'll just move the H, E, and then just move around on it, and it comes up, and that thing is pretty dadgum accurate.
I had that on my last one, I should
I didn't
reinstall it
know.
on this one, I used to do pretty good with that, but
I
it
love it.
got it wrong once in a while.
I have found that my vocabulary is larger than my dictionary. I can't spell.
Yeah.
I
I
know
have
the
to
word.
delete things sometimes,
Yeah.
it's the wrong one got added in there.
I know the word, but I can't spell it,
Right.
Oh,
and I
yeah.
can't find it.
Yeah.
So I changed the word to something else that I can spell.
Your finger has a bigger vocabulary.
Well, that's
Oh,
true.
Because
that-
it comes up with words that you don't even know.
That is me. That happens to me. I got Shrek fingers, so
Yeah. I didn't know I spoke German, too.
Well, the one thing about the English language, there are over 500,000 words in English.
Ah,
Well, that's probably why they say English is the hardest language to learn.
Yeah.
Well, it's-
Because we have all this slang.
the slang, that's
Oh,
the,
yeah.
We don't have it in German, or, we don't use that.
But a lot
People
of
used to
it is-
comment to me, what in the world are you talking about? I use a lot of slang when I talk to you.
But there's a lot of foreign language in the evolution of English.
Oh, absolutely.
Our English.
Yeah. And so we pick up words. It was just kind of like, Vic and I were talking yesterday, and something I had come across was Shakespeare, when he was very popular and everything, he used 34,000 words. Now, but only 8,000 were used, the 8,000 were used over and over. The other 24 was used one time, and that was about it. Now, who in the hell would count all these words? I mean, you have to read everything.
Something wrong with
okay,
that.
this is what we're.
Shakespeare scholars, they've
Yeah.
had 600 years.
Was it really Shakespeare?
Like the Nostradamus scholars.
Yeah.
Well, that gives you that.
Winston Churchill's the one that said
He didn't
England
write
and
this, he
America,
didn't
two
write that.
countries
Bullshit.
separated by a common language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
but that's what I heard about, like other languages, they get directly to the point where we'll put to and thee and da.
We use a lot of
da,
articles,
das,
yeah.
yeah. And
where
they
it
go
changes meanings.
straight to it.
And we have words that sound the same that are spelled different, that have different meanings, and we have words that are spelled the same but mean different things. I mean, and
Yeah, we say the big red yellow chair, and they say the chair is red yellow big.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I said this before, that when I worked in a Navy hangar overseas, we had a civilian Portuguese guy working in there, and we had Filipinos, because the Navy has a lot of Filipinos, and he was in the supply section, and the Filipino guy could speak Tagalog, which is their native language, and the Portuguese guy could speak Portuguese, and they understood what each other was saying, because they're both Latin-based languages. You know, so
The same is true with Spanish and Portuguese.
yeah, that's why
Because
it's all Latin-based
the
language.
Portuguese understand the Spanish, but the Spanish don't understand all the Portuguese.
I know I'm about to sound like a complete idiot right now, but, it's okay.
Join the club.
Now,
Jimmy knows exactly how you feel.
I resemble that remark.
well, okay, let me go ahead and get it over with. I've already thrown it out there now.
Go for it.
Okay, we all know that Mexico speaks Spanish, of course. What's the dialect difference in Spain and Mexico?
Well, it's like us in England.
The way the pronunciation is, when you run across a Z, they will pronounce it in Mexico, but in the Castilian Spanish, they have
They have a lisp.
see it, and it's almost like you are stuttering.
They have a lisp because they had a king once that had a lisp.
Well, that's right.
Everybody started imitating.
Really?
My
King was that?
You didn't want to embarrass the king, so you had to
Some
live
king of
along with
Spain.
him.
Yeah, that's about kings of England, I know. The kings of Spain,
The
everybody.
one that there was a lispy king of Spain.
Yeah, that's why they
Yeah,
all
I
started
used to
speaking.
kid Rodriguez about that. I said,
Was he from Lisbon?
That was
And
what-
I'm
That's how they
guessing
named the
it's
town.
gonna be the same way, with Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic,
Yeah,
and
they
all
all speak
that.
their own dialects.
So,
But they can understand each other though, correct? Okay.
well, that's kind of like what you hear over in Louisiana. I have a difficult time understanding the French.
And their French is not the French that the French
We all
speak.
know.
Yeah,
My,
Because-
that's Cajun.
I've got an uncle that he from Louisiana, Kunas. And boy, oh boy, Uncle Chad, my cousin Brad's dad. And let me tell you, the way they talk, they'll be saying something like, on the end of everything. But you talk about cooking, good grief,
That's what I
that
was gonna
man
say,
can
yeah.
cook.
Can't talk, but he can cook.
Oh, good grief, he can cook. And he was in the Navy, retired as a Master Chief in the Navy. He was a rescue diver in the Navy.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, I started working in Louisiana in the mid-90s, and there were boat captains down there that I worked with that couldn't read or write. And they barely spoke English because they were raised in their culture, and they spoke Cajun French. And they just learned English just enough to make it through school. I worked with a captain, he'd been a captain since the mid-60s, and he could barely write in his logbook. And it was like big block letters, and it really half the stuff he wrote didn't make any sense. It's a good thing his logbooks never had to go before the Coast Guard for an investigation, because they wouldn't have known what he was talking about.
Oh, good.
I had 4 people working for me in Florida that on their time card, I had to turn the thing over this way, and then I had to put a hairpin over here, so that they could recognize one thing. Me, when I punch in, I pick up that card. And then this other guy, he goes by whatever he saw. And that's all, I don't know how they communicate. And how they survive in society. To go ask somebody a favor or ask somebody to do something.
Let me tell you, this captain I worked with that couldn't read or write, like I said, he'd been in the Gulf since the mid-60s as a boat captain. Well, out there, all the oil platforms all have signs on them that tell you their oil lease block number. Like it may say, like Green Canyon 85, and that's like these lease blocks are 2.5 mile squares that are on a map or a chart, and that's where a company will lease that area to drill for oil or whatever. But we have these charts that have all these. They're all drawn out on the chart. So anyway, this captain, this was before GPS, he had the old LORAN system for navigation. We had radar and all that stuff. But he'd get lost, like he wasn't sure where he was at, so he'd pull up into a platform and read the sign, and then go look on the chart to try to find to make sure he was,
It's like a picture, look for
to
the
make
same
sure he was
picture.
near the right course he was on. I'm serious, man.
Oh my God.
And if it was night, he'd just pull up and hit it with a spotlight.
Okay.
That's funny.
There I am, Robert.
Yeah.
That's where I am.
Sounds like a little match game.
It was pretty funny because it got to where all he wanted to do was cook, fish, and take a nap. That was pretty much. He was the boat captain, but that was pretty much his job. He would cook, he'd fish, and he'd nap.
Now,
Somebody else did all the driving.
Exactly.
God.
That's how I learned as a deckhand to drive a boat.
So, was it the oil rig that you worked on?
Now we're on boats,
Oh, okay, okay.
servicing the rigs.
Servicing there, yeah.
Okay, I got you. I was gonna ask, working on those boats, did y'all ever actually fish while y'all was out there?
Used to in the old days. They don't let you anymore. But you're supposed to have a commercial fishing license because you're a commercial boat. And if you catch anything offshore, you're not supposed to clean it offshore. You're supposed to bring it to land in case they want to inspect it for the size and make sure you're not catching something out
Make
of
sure it's
season.
legal and everything?
Yeah, but of course, we clean it, and eat it.
Right.
evidence.
Freeze what we didn't eat. The old Captain Leonard, the same guy, he would catch red snapper, amberjack. He was a hell of a fisherman. And he would just load up. He'd clean it all, he'd ziplock it, put it in the freezer, and then when we were getting ready to go home after 28 days, he'd, here boy, you want some fish? And I was bringing home amberjack and red snapper just every time I came home.
You can't do that now. Huh?
And no.
So he
Not
said.
supposed to.
So he said.
No, we don't, especially working that construction boat with like 3 or 4 other third-party companies on there.
You
No
can't
fish.
tell who's
You
going.
can't risk their.
No
Can't
fish.
trust your crew.
You
We,
lose
as a
that
matter of
company as
fact,
your
even
transport.
back when we were still fishing, Captain Leonard caught a bunch of snapper, and he was going to send it up to the rig we were working with. It's just, here, have some fish. And they said, "Oh, we're sorry, Captain, we can't take it. It hasn't been inspected by USDA. They were not allowed to no longer fish in the Gulf of Mexico to feed themselves because
Wow.
the fish they were pulling out of the Gulf of Mexico
Yeah.
hadn't been given the okay by the USDA.
They're all
I hate that. So
Wow.
USDA.
Stupid.
Yeah.
There's all this over-regulation. That was
Yeah.
what Trump was good for too.
Yeah.
That was the other good thing he did. He said for every new regulation that comes in, you have to get rid of 7.
Well, Interstate Commerce Commission, that just kind of took over everything. It crossed borders where before it
Stupid
was
stuff.
I gotta-
states.
I got to tell
Kill
you
business.
one more story about Captain Leonard.
Right.
We were on the boat standing by a platform. We weren't working at the time. We were standing by, and it was real calm and everything. And we were watching a guy with the binoculars. He was up on the rig, and he was fishing. And he pulling up a red snapper, and it was like 100 feet up there, So he's picking up one with this big red snapper, and he gets about halfway up, and it falls off the hook.
Oh,
So the snapper was dead because they swim so deep when you pull them up.
The bladder.
The bladder, So it was dead. So it was just floating. Old Leonard, we didn't have a motorized launch back in these days. We just had a little paint boat that we would use to paint the hull.
oh,
And it was just a little John boat with no motor or nothing. Leonard's like, come on boys, let's put the boat in the water.
Oh,
And he
my
gets,
God.
he put it in the water, he
For that
gets in
one
it,
fish.
he's standing up, he's Kunash, he's standing up, he paddles over to this fish, and he picks it up and he waves the rig and they send down the crew basket that we used to transfer, and he puts the fish in the basket and they pick the fish up. He paddles back to our boat.
Oh, God.
that's amazing.
He's not gonna let that fish go to waste.
I learned something about the word kunas. I used that with a guy that had written several books on Cajuns, and he was a brilliant guy. And I said, yeah, a lot of my friends are kunases. And he says, well, let me bear with me here. I got to give you a little advice on the use of the term. He said, it's actually an insult to use the word, not unlike the N-word and other stuff, but among Cajuns, it's used
Oh, you hear it all the time.
periodically
Between them,
among
it's okay.
themselves, but whenever you refer to them from outside their culture, it really takes offense, and even within the culture, it's becoming less and less popular to use, but
Working on boats, everybody, that's how, nobody cares.
they're third-class citizens.
What was the word you used again?
Vic, what was the word you used? Was it Kunads?
Kunas. Ass. Kunas.
Well, I
C-O-O-N.
hear Kunads a lot of times, maybe it was in something I would hear in the Marine Corps or something like that.
Kunas.
but no, I heard, but somehow or other, the guys use it as CRUDDS. And that also, it was almost kind of like the way you
Never heard that.
Was that what you were hearing referring to Cajuns, or you were?
Oh, no, not Cajuns. I don't even remember ever seeing a Cajun in the Marine Corps. There might have been one or two.
But I don't know where the CRUDDS came from.
But like, when I came back and went down to Opelika for 4 months, waiting on school to open up, I was with people from Puerto Rico, the first time I had ever seen somebody Spanish in the Marine Corps. And that was 53. And
So we're talking 69 years ago, 68 years ago, and you can
Well,
still
that-
remember
that-
what they said?
it was almost like that.
What was the rest of the conversation about?
See, he's forgot. Maybe he's got that wrong.
It probably had women involved.
Probably.
You know, they've got more than one sunken U-boat in the Gulf of Mexico from World War II.
Yeah.
But they got one that changes its position with the current and the tide. So it's like they found it in one place and then later they found parts of it in another place. It'll move depending on what the undersea currents are doing.
It's the ghost of the Nazi war machine.
They also say that they know that back in the day that the Nazis were buying some of their supplies from the local fishermen down there. You know, they bring it out in their shrimp boats and give it to the Nazis. They surface at night and transfer groceries and stuff.
Good. They probably got paid well.
Entrepreneurs.
I'm sure they probably did.
They had one U-boat sunk right outside where the Mississippi River, which is really Southwest Pass, because the river breaks up into a lot of, tributaries into the Gulf. But the main one they call Southwest Pass, and that's the one that the cruise ships use nowadays, and the shipping and everything going to New Orleans. But anyway, they had a U-boat that was laying in wait out there and was sinking ships as they came out of New Orleans. And it happened to be on the surface or close to the surface, and they had an airplane saw it, and they bombed it from the air and sunk it right after it had sunk a ship. So there's a ship in that U-boat, and they know where these are at, and they're within like a mile of each other on the bottom out there where World War II.
Well, some of the Nazi leaders, when they figured out that the war was lost, didn't they emigrate to South America?
Argentina.
Yeah, Argentina, yep.
And then, right, okay, and then about 30, 40 years later, after the fact, they get captured. And, I mean, there are some
the
people.
The Jews captured a couple of them down there.
Yeah, that's where Mangala.
Yeah,
Mangala,
Mangala,
yeah.
yep.
That's what they call it.
Matter of fact, that was on TV yesterday. They was talking about it. What's the group? The Jewish Israeli. It was like Israeli Special Forces group.
Mossad.
The Nazi
Yeah.
groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, they call them the
I was
Nazi
gonna say
groups.
facade, but it's
And
facade.
There was a couple down there in Argentina that they went after, and they talked about one of the times where they found the guy, and one of the guys, he was doing something with him, and he was in the passenger seat. They pulled up in the car, and the other guys were inside the house, and they all stripped down butt naked. They had plastic all in the house, and they had their clothes out there and everything. And when the guy walked in, they all jumped on him, and they killed him in the house. And afterwards they cleaned up, they put their clothes back on, and they loaded them up and they left.
I think in Angola they drugged and they put him on a commercial airline. And flew him
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
That was ballsy, man.
And didn't he wake up on the trip back? He woke up on the airplane and
It
it
was
was
already too late.
yeah.
Yeah, he was,
There's a documentary film on all this
Yeah.
called The Boys from Brazil.
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I'll tell you something else. I don't know if y'all know. At the end of the American Civil War, we had a lot of Southern troops and some officers that went to Brazil, and they actually they settled a town called Americana, and they're buried in the cemeteries down there, and they still have descendants in that area that are all Southern.
Is that Boots and Sundance?
No, that was Bolivia.
Oh, okay.
Well, wasn't it,
That was close.
They were
That
members
was close,
of the
yeah.
KGC, wasn't they? The Knights of the Golden Circle, part of the KGC. It's the same thing I'm thinking of. That I forget which country it was, but they sent KGC members down there that actually they were going to do like he's talking about. They set up an actual. When the time came to do it again, basically.
What's the KGC?
Knights of the Golden Circle.
Knights of the Golden Circle. Whoa.
I've seen it on the map. The city is called Americana, and it was settled by the
I think there's some documentaries on that too, people go down there and done some films.
I've seen a picture of the cemetery.
I remember reading some years ago that I've forgotten part of the story, but there was this person that went down to South America, Brazil or Argentina or wherever, and he goes in the bar, has a few drinks, and a couple of guys were in there, and he kept feeding them drinks, and all of a sudden one of the guys said, let's take over the country. So they did. This is a true story.
I think it was in Panama, wasn't it? His name was Walker. There was a guy named Walker that took over Panama back in 1915 or something like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
And started a banana, the banana business, the banana wars, yeah.
Yeah, American Confederacy is still alive in Brazilian city of Americana. That's an article from 2017.
There's a great book. There's several books out there on foods that are just amazing to read because these agricultural products drove economies for centuries. One of them is called Banana. If you read the book Banana, it just describes the history of how the banana became an economic entity, which it still is. It's actually the #1 product sold by Walmart to this day.
The #1 product
is the banana. And as a single item going through the register, it's the most registered product going.
Well, we're keeping that saying alive because we eat 1 or 2 bananas for breakfast every day.
Well, anyway, these books are good reading. The Banana, I read Banana. Cotton, it's the biography of a revolutionary fiber. I thought, wow, the stuff you learn when you read that, because cotton and slavery, cotton in India, all this British exportation of cotton to feed their textile mills, and then eventually our textile mills. In that Massachusetts, what's the name of the town in Massachusetts? Lowell, Massachusetts became the center of fiber production, and not production, but
refined or
textile mills on the rivers, Fall River, Massachusetts, and what did I say the name of the town was anyway?
Yeah, but that's
It wasn't important, I'm sure.
factories, so that the wheel would produce electricity and all that to run the machines.
Right, and once they had that, and there was even inside the cotton book is a story about the guy that went to England and memorized all the machinery, how they did the steam engines, because you couldn't take any papers with you or draw anything was the equivalent of taking photographs. There was no spying allowed on all those steam engines that they had going in England. They controlled the production of textiles in the world. And they didn't want that information coming out. So this one guy from Massachusetts, he goes in and memorizes all this stuff. And he comes back and he draws the entire thing out, and he has all these mills built in Lowell, Massachusetts. And then they started bringing in all these young women that were unable to get married for whatever reason, and they locked them, basically locked them in dormitories and worked them 24 hours a day, turning out textiles. They basically were modern, they were slaves in the late 1800s, and early 1800s too, because then that drove the cotton production. Needed to have more cotton, they needed more slaves in the South, and so you had to produce more and more cotton to go feed the mills up there. And the American Civil War came back to the economics of cotton is one of the themes in the book. And the Indian Revolution for independence came from the exploitation of cotton, and the actual production of the original cotton coming from Africa, the long fiber cotton that came from there and came over and was developed and ran over.
What's the name of this book?
Just Cotton, the biography of a revolutionary fiber. Now there's other books. Now there's Peanuts. The Oyster is an awesome book. These are books that authors have chosen themes that are based on foods or fibers or agricultural products.
I like to read the one on corn. That'd be interesting.
They have
corn's been around for ages.
And if you read it,
Corn
all of a sudden
development
you
of
realize
modern
it's in everything you touch.
That's a byproduct of corn cob, yeah.
So anyway, corn would be a good one. the peanut is an excellent one, and, but the two that stick in my mind right now, well, three, the oyster, the cotton, and the banana. And you just think about all the little wars that went on down in South America and Cuba and everything else. Sugar would be a tremendous book to
What
read.
about salt?
Be another fantastic book, and it's out there. They're written. All you have to do is go Amazon those topics and you'll find.
The,
I'm gonna check into that.
another one that made, played a big role in the world would be, spices and stuff,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
especially from India and Asia and all that.
Well, those were the first
Spice
drivers.
Road, was there a Spice Road?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Silk Road,
Yeah.
Silk Road?
Silk
Spice
Road.
Silk and spice, those are some of the very first drivers of economics. And then more modern ones are these that we're talking about here.
Well-
Now it's oil
Well,
and
Colombia's second largest export is coffee. Of course,
So-
you know what the first one is, I'd like to read on coffee.
well, there's a book. And what you learn on history,
Somebody
just
named
by
Juan
reading those is
Valdez, I
fantastic.
think, wrote a book like
Yeah, he's got a mule, I think, yeah.
I think this is kind of a cool story. I've told you part of it before about Rodriguez and his son. The one thing I never told you was with Rodriguez, in Spain. After they were having conflicts going on, like over in Portugal, where we drove into this one city and everything had been closed down up to this point, and then we see this big crowd out in the center of town. So I rolled the window down and asked them what was going on. They said, "Oh, we just killed the mayor." I said, "What?" I said, "Why'd you do that?" He said, "Oh, he's a communist." But going further, so I get Rodriguez's son over here and getting the green card and everything like that, so his dad wanted me to do a favor because he couldn't afford. I mean, it wasn't he couldn't afford, but he was limited to only taking $1,000 to leave Spain to go on one of the business trips and stuff like that. So he was limited. So he said, "Hey, can you help me out?" And so we concocted this plan. I would bring him dollars, and he would give me Spanish money for this. So he had money. He had all this, and what I would do is go out to Texas, and I had a friend out there that would cash it in for American currency, and so we had the three-way trade going in there.
Mule.
Yeah.
Money laundering.
You were the mule for the.
I don't think I would have told that story.
Well, Rodriguez was the guy in the cork business?
Yeah, he was a multi-millionaire, but he couldn't take more than $1,000 to get out of
Oh,
him.
my God.
And he's losing customers.
This is all about the cork tree. So the
Yeah.
cork would be
Yeah.
another book.
Wow.
He used to get they would get the harvested cork for the baseballs, which he was the father of the modern baseball. You knew that, right?
So I was the guy's biggest customer. He had lots of,
Wow.
Corking the ball and the bat.
and I was thinking seriously about setting a plan up in Spain because transporting all this cork over here, it is, specific gravity is 0.33, one third that of water. So they call that specific gravity. And so what happens is all this air is coming over here, and I'm paying a heck of a lot of money for air about the product.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I'll just put the balls together over in Spain. Oh, then, man, what I found out was, the people, on vacation, they had to be paid at least for a month's vacation. If a woman
This
was
was in
pregnant,
the 60s.
okay, you couldn't fire her. If the husband had to come in and take her place. All this was going on. You never have heard about stuff like this.
Oh, we have.
Spain had some crazy rules.
Karen can tell you all of Europe. Karen can tell you about Mars's operations in Europe. I mean, you could
Who's
not. Karen had all his dealings with people in Europe and with Mars and their plants. In France got so bad. I mean, you could not you couldn't let anybody go. If you wanted to fire somebody, you had to pay them 2 years salary.
2 years salary, exactly right.
If you
That
let
was
them
the-
go, let them go, you gotta give them 2 years salary right there.
Yeah.
Gosh.
And
That's a
so
severance
I said,
package.
Did
no
it
way,
matter
Jose.
why you were
No,
fired?
no matter what.
Encouraging mediocrity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you couldn't fire them.
Well, in Holland,
Basically, what Morris did was they eventually
Come on,
They
Mars,
just closed down their France plant and moved to basically, well, I think mostly they already had stuff in England and other places.
well, in the Netherlands, if you registered, like you told the government you're an artist, that's how you want to make your living. If your art was so crappy that no one would buy it, the government would buy it from you, just to give you a living as an artist,
What?
God,
as a so-called
just
artist.
say you're an artist.
Well, we do
That was
that.
on 60 Minutes.
You
They had
can,
a
you
thing.
can
Well,
paint hell doo-doo all over a
Yeah, now,
canvas and there's a grant for that.
yeah.
Well, this is the main reason that communism won't survive is because, everybody is supposed to have a job. And so, but all people are not created equally. Some people work, and other people look around and say, oh, why in the hell is he working? I mean, he could sit on his butt and still get the same amount of money as the guy working.
That would be me.
Yeah.
Dick,
You were
That's
looking
me
at
right
the
now.
picture.
Yeah, I would learn that pretty quick.
Dick, it just occurred to me again, I forgot, how do you say, is it coefficient restitution?
Coefficient of restitution.
Of
Okay,
restitution.
that means the hardness or softness or something.
Okay, I would,
But it's not good for scientists, I mean, to use such common language. We have to embellish it.
so the Reader's Digest version of what that is what now? Speed?
Well, no,
Velocity?
see like what they're doing with baseball, that they're changing they use the word in the newspaper, efficient, okay? But they forgot about the rest of it that goes with it. It's coefficient of restitution.
Coefficient.
Otherwise, just restitution doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
But that means the hardness of something.
That's it.
So
That's
what
what
they're
I'm
trying to figure out what they're going to do is the harder the ball, the further it will go.
Okay.
And this is like with golf. I mean, I had to start all this with golf. The harder the ball, but there, 100 compression, anything over 100 compression ball, it is illegal. And so you have to make sure. Well, with golf balls, when we were doing that, you tried with the machines that wind the ball. You tried to get 100. This is what you're shooting for.
Yeah.
Okay, so this finish, every ball that goes down line, everything is working so fast. You're kicking this out. This is 100. This is 90. This is 80. This is 70.
Yeah.
Okay, and so there's a market for all this.
Yeah.
And so when you get down to the bottom, where you only have 60-70%, hardness, those go out to rifle or golf ranges.
Yeah.
And so, but like with baseball, what they're going to do is they're going to soften the baseball because it won't go as far.
Now, you related a story. Was it Arnold Palmer you played golf with and you had a fixed ball?
Okay, well, see, what this did was, this was a compound that came in which absorbed energy. And so when you hit this thing as hard as you want, this is where I came up with the limited flight softball, and so this is where softball became so popular, because then instead of going into these big cities that couldn't, they couldn't build a big field like Chicago, San Francisco, New York, you had small fields, and so I had to come up with a limited flight softball.
Right.
And that really made things boom.
Oh,
Speaking of baseballs and everything, so is it true that they would either, what do you call it, juice the ball or not
yeah,
juice the
juice
ball?
was
Is
That's
that
the
what
coefficient of restitution.
I know they're going the opposite way.
Don't
now.
use the word juice.
Yeah.
Use the word coefficient
Well,
of restitution.
what we talked about not too long ago, when you brought the subject up, all the balls, they have a certain amount of mud. They go over the balls, the umpires, before the game starts. And so they figure out how many balls are going to be used. See, I never wanted to go for the major leagues. I wanted the little league. That's where the business was. That was like several million dozen versus just a few
Right.
thousand of us.
Yeah.
right?
And then when I was doing all this, there were only 2 leagues, American and National, 8 teams in American, 8 teams in National. Now, you've got what, about 32?
Yeah, 30 or 32 now.
But it was so easy to invent this ball that any one of us could have done it in a weekend.
Absolutely.
I could have probably done this in a weekend, and I.
Yeah, but you can't even say.
But you couldn't do that
coefficient
being president at the
restitution.
same
I
time.
can't do that, that's
Yeah, but
true.
see, I
Can't
wouldn't have
do that
made
and be
any more
president
money
at the
doing
same
it that way. I
time.
would have made less. You stretch this problem out.
Oh,
Now,
7 years.
is that, do they really do that kind of stuff though? Is there a way to juice the baseballs and not juice? Okay.
No. The only way you can do this is if you had a machine which would shoot the ball out and you could figure out what the coefficient of restitution was. Then you could take some of those balls, the ones that didn't come back as fast, because remember, the coefficient of restitution is the hardness or softness of the ball. Harder, further. Softer, less.
Well, see,
Yeah,
That's easy.
but they're making them softer because they want to cut it
Yeah,
off 4
you
feet
can
off the
basically,
play.
yes, you
Yeah.
can juice
Is
the
that all
ball.
they're trying to cut off?
4 or
Yeah.
5 feet, they
You
said.
have to have it juiced before it gets to the
Yeah,
field.
they-
I mean, he has
they're trying to cut
already
down the
built
home runs.
To be juiced.
Right.
You have a
For the
juiced
cheap
ball
home
and
runs
an
anyway.
unjuiced ball. Those are high coefficient of restitution and low coefficient.
I saw a video the other day, I saw some baseball documentary of Joe DiMaggio flying out in the World Series, and the guy, Al Gianfrido, caught it in the outfield, but he was in left field, but he was at the 415 sign. And I'm saying, you'll not see a park in the majors with 415 in center field nowadays, because home runs bring the audience.
Oh,
That's why they say Yankee Stadium was the house that Ruth built, because Ruth hit more home runs in one season than the whole rest of the American League combined. And he's the one that put the asses in the seats, and they built Yankee Stadium
Yeah.
because all these people wanted to see Babe Ruth, so they call it the house that Ruth built.
Oh, so they literally did build it.
Yeah, they built it after Ruth came from Boston. They built Yankee Stadium.
But they brought in the distances or
At
something?
left field.
So they would be home
Well,
runs?
center field in the original Yankee Stadium was like 400, 500 feet because they had those monuments in the outfield.
Oh,
And they were actually on the field of play. They were monuments to Miller Huggins. And
gosh.
I forget who all
Good
put out
night,
there.
that's a shot right there.
Well, the Polo Grounds, center field was over 500 feet easy.
Where was the polo grounds?
In New York, right across the river from Yankee Stadium, sort of Giants play.
Giants, okay.
There's that famous picture of 1954 World Series of Willie Mays catching the ball over his shoulder.
Right.
He was already 450 feet away from home plate when he caught that ball.
Good grief.
And then he turned and threw it. And they say the play is really known for the throw and not the catch, because when he caught it, he spun and threw it the second.
I didn't know that.
It was outrageous fields back then. I mean, huge. I mean, in the Polo Grounds, the foul lines were like 300 feet, 298 feet, and 300 feet easy. But center field was 500 something. So it was like,
Wow. You get a home run there, you.
Yeah, you wanted to go for a sharp left or right.
Yeah.
look on Pinterest has a section of you can like old baseball pictures, and you can see some of the old stadiums. They're really neat looking. Some of the outfields were just.
Now, let me ask you
huge.
this then, was that why Boston had the green monster, cause they couldn't go as far, so they just went up
I
with
think
it?
so, because if you see it from the air, it's like chopped off right there,
Yeah,
But the fence is like 37
yeah,
feet high.
that's
something
why,
like that.
so that's why I was figuring they couldn't go as far, so I said, okay, well, the heck, we'll go straight up then.
You often wonder why in the world that they don't move and build a new stadium.
Well, because Fenway's like
It's history
Wrigley,
now,
no one
yeah.
wants to see, because if they move out of there, they'll tear it down.
Yeah.
It's historical, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's,
and they'll never move out of Wrigley or Fenway, I don't.
Yeah, well, Wrigley's got what, the green ivy or the ivy and.
Ivy on the brick.
well, everybody thought New York would leave the Yankee Stadium too.
Yeah.
Oh, they're still in Yankee Stadium, they just built a new one.
In Cleveland, way back when I was young, out in right field, it was the reverse of Wrigley Field. It was right field that they had this short, and I was playing with a semi-pro team when I was 16, and so I know we were playing some championship game, and I played the ball to right field because I was one to try to get a home run. So I just got it over the second baseman's head.
You weren't even out of college.
Adobe had
No, I
me
was still
figured
in college,
Yeah.
but I was playing. We had a
out.
traveling.
You can't hit it, come on in.
the summer.
He graduated college at 17.
Yeah, but it took me longer. It took me 10 years to get out of.
You ever hear of Jim Thorpe?
Oh, yeah, the football player.
Well, he was the decathlon in the Olympics, and he won all the gold medals, and he was famous athlete.
An Indian.
But
American, yeah.
But before he went to the Olympics, he played for the New York Giants for like just a few games, or he was on the team, but he wasn't a star or something. But anyway, because he had attained professional status, they found out later after the Olympics, and they took his gold medals away. They disqualified him.
Yeah.
Because he had played professional sports.
But they gave him back posthumously,
Yeah, many years later.
50 years later.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because he had played for the New York Giants. He was a hell of an athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mel Ott was a great hitter there for the Giants.
You know what? Yeah.
There's a town in Pennsylvania called Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, he was from Carlisle, Pennsylvania. So probably close by. They may even change the name.
How do you remember all that stuff?
That's a
I read a lot.
I do too.
That's what I wonder
thing
about
right there.
him. He comes out with this stuff.
You don't see any of that anymore. Now, like you used to, like Jim Thorpe and all them, they were great at multiple sports. Nowadays, you're only one thing. I think the last, good player recently was Deion Sanders in the 90s and Bo Jackson.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Well,
Football and baseball.
I was what occurred to me was, he's no longer, is Bruce Jenner.
Oh.
What's her name?
Yeah.
Well, she's
He can run and heels.
Yeah, he can run and hill. But yeah, I mean, you know.
Bo Jackson, I think, man. You know, he played baseball at the Kansas City Royals. He hit the longest home run in Kansas City history.
Yeah.
And if he would have just stuck with baseball and not gone back to the Raiders, he would have been phenomenal. Because he was still learning the game.
He was climbing the walls.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Well, that's what I was getting ready to say. What made him one of the most famous things was when it was the All-Star game, I believe.
I believe it was an All-Star
Reagan
game.
was there, and he was in the booth talking, and that's when it happened. And he said, "Bo Jackson says hello, Mr. Reagan."
Bo Jackson was, man,
a beast.
him going back to football, just
Yeah.
hip injury he got, and the
Just a freak
And
out.
degenerative arthritis that came from that.
Did you see the documentary they done? Was ESPN 30 for 30, I believe, done it. The type of injury that he had. He literally had a hip replacement and then returned to play football.
Yeah.
That is
He
nuts.
tried to play baseball some more too, but I don't think he never got his step back. He never got his speed.
I mean, even today, you know, with a hip replacement and playing running back of all things, you know, the position where you have to stop, cut, and you know, and all that, and you have a fake hip in there, and
They showed Bo Jackson one time taking a bat.
You know, he broke it.
Yeah, just over his
Well, he
head.
would
I
do
mean,
that.
God.
He struck out one time in the play and he broke the
yeah,
bat.
he would do that. He would do
Over
that all the
his
time.
head?
Yeah.
Yes.
He broke it.
And
He's
like you
walking
said-
away, you know, and he just.
Make sure you get the grain right.
Yeah.
Like you said, you know, when he was striking, it was times he was
That's
striking
a hard story to believe.
He just take it like a phone.
Yes.
Yeah, Mantle. Oh, you know, Mantle, he'd go in and he'd take his bat and he'd bash the water cooler and everything. Bo Jackson just break his bat
Just
and
break it.
snap
Bo
it.
Jackson, he done it several times. He would strike out and get mad. He would take it and boom, you know.
Yeah.
And
But you see, it wasn't the bat that caused the problem, it was the batter.
Yeah.
That tour, yes.
right.
That's exactly right.
Speaking of Deion Sanders, you know, I've been a Braves fan forever. I remember when he was playing for the Braves, and he was a good baseball player. I mean, he was exciting to watch, and running the bases. And,
Great
He
football
was
player
about
too.
280 hitter.
yeah, he wasn't the best hitter, but he was he had a good on base percentage, and he could
When he got
steal.
on base, yeah.
He was
that's
one of those
what
guys that
made
made things happen, you know.
And that's like in football, you know, what made him so great, you know, he was an awesome quarterback, but where he was exciting was when he the punt return game,
Yeah.
you know, or the kick return. That's when you really watch right there, 'cause he was magic, man.
The Braves for a time had Deion and Otis Nixon at the top of the lineup, and both of those guys were fast, and they were like spray hitters, and that was when they were exciting because they'd get on base and they'd make things
Yeah,
happen.
you gotta think
See, you know a lot about baseball, and so you'll remember that guy's name that taught me how to play baseball.
Oh,
His folks lived with us. They had half the house, we had the other half. And Gene Woodland.
Gene Woodland.
What was he?
he's an outfielder for the Yankees.
Right. And what position did he play?
He's an outfielder.
He was left fielder, same time as DiMaggio.
He came up in like
And
46 or something like that.
he died in 2002, but his lifetime batting average was 282, and he won the championship 4 times.
Yeah.
He was a
But Gene Woodland lived in your
Gene-
house for
Yeah.
4 years.
Because this was the Depression. His dad was a cab driver. Who the hell was taking a cab, during the Depression?
Yeah.
That thing was horrible.
Well, back in those days, you know, a
And you
lot
were
of
how
ball
old then?
players.
This is when you were like 12, 16,
Say what?
You were
How
12,
old were
15,
you?
16.
Oh, we started, see, I was a youngster then. My God, I was born in 31. You know, my dad, I think it was around, my closest recollection was around 1933 or 4 when we moved from South Akron, which was all black, over to the east side. So, yeah, we had, it was a kind of a big house. I remember my dad, it cost him $1,100 to buy this big house.
Wow, that was,
Yeah, it was, wow. That was a horrible amount.
Yeah.
So guys, we're gonna close out CRUDS for you. You wanna close it out?
Go ahead,
Okay.
What is this, a
Well,
prayer or
yeah,
benediction?
yeah, that's
or
all,
what?
wait a minute, how we close this out?
Does everybody say your name as you go around the table? Jim,
uh,
talk to the camera and say, I'm Jim Kemp.
Jim Campbell, proud to be at CRUDS this morning.
Dick, your name?
I'm Dick Miller, and I'm proud to be a crud today.
oh, Richard Wood, I'm here all the time.
Me too.
And your name is?
Jim Kilcrease,
His name is Jim Kilcrease.
Dobie.
Dobie. We call him Killer sometimes.
Yeah, Killer's got a power name, yes.
My name is Vic Campbell, and I'm happy to be here. I love the CRUDS.
Where'd you get those shirts anyway?
We got a place for that.
Yeah.
I'm Sarah Nichols. I'm Neil.
Tommy Nichols, happy to be here.
And we're just happy that this happened today. So
Woohoo!
this has been a nice little gathering. I think we got a lot of good
Yeah.
things.
Oh,
We
yeah.
offer a lot of good stuff. We did not get to world peace. That was supposed to be our next topic.
Oh, man.
This has happened before.
You shut us down too soon.
We could have had it. We could have had it in the next 5 minutes, but
Well-
time's up.
Let's have lunch and then start.
Okay.
Now, there's a
You want to
nap.
go out now?
Go do your
Gotta have a nap
behind
before
on your
work.
nap.
I got my naps.
Yeah,
Well, you don't want to
You
come
know.
to a conclusion on that statement, otherwise we would have no reason to meet again.
Oh, okay.
Right.
That's true.
But I think Vic and I'll go out and get a bite to eat here in just a minute. Anybody else want to join us?
Yeah.
I got
You don't have a crud shirt on?
I don't have one. I don't know how that happened.
Grover Tees. You
Well,
have to go to Grover Tees.
This is
I
my
want to go there.
my son's wife's idea. I had nothing at all to do with it.
Yeah, she made this.
Oh, nice.
But
So
she
we're thinking
hears
about
the
having
word
some more
crud,
bags.
she sees it always on the
These posts, yeah.
it's posted. And every time they go out of town, they post
She's got a
it.
cricket.
I use I have the definition of CRUD, C-R-U-D-D, and CRUDS in my calendar
Also the
all the
stickers.
time. It's right
You
here.
put on the back of
I'll
the
flip it out.
windshields and stuff like that?
Send it to somebody.
Yeah, she makes all
Send
that
it to her.
stuff. Yeah, yeah,
I texted
we'll get a
you one
couple
time.
days, let's just know y'all
You
signs
don't
and
look
stuff,
at text, I
yeah.
think.
Doing for you guys.
I don't
Well,
read
I'll tell you
text
what we'll
at
do.
all.
We'll
I sent you a
honor
happy
her
birthday on
production of
Yeah.
this
Oh,
and have
okay,
us
thank
set
you.
right.
Belatedly. The issue, right,
I'm
you
not
know,
gonna
I only
do this,
use it,
Yeah.
But I think
You
we'll
They-
honor
you
her.
read
Yeah,
email?
no, I'm not saying
I
that.
email I do, I look at that because I know that's
She did
important,
this
and
again.
Vic is sending me something every
Make them
day.
about-
And please, that way,
Okay.
and as long as you
And
have
then
it,
we'll come to you, and
you
we'll have a whole different
return
design.
or whatever, I'll just put something in there, or as long as I have
She's done a great
your
job.
number, I
I
think.
like
Yeah,
it.
you can, you can email me back.
She's done a good job on
Yeah,
this one
just
right there.
reply.
I like that.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
Fancy's kind of
And I'd
like
be
the
happy
bad
to
boys.
do that.
I
I
just-
just return it, but otherwise, I don't
I
look
just-
at it.
We
Well,
can
Vic
be
told me
the
he didn't
somewhat
think you did
mischievous
text,
crud.
but I said,
Yeah.
and it was.
Yeah, I just don't like to
I'm only
name
carrying
crud.
my cell
just don't
phone
like
now,
the
I mean, I
name
can
crud.
receive a text on that.
Yeah.
But
Cause
nobody ever does.
I
I
don't,
use
I
it,
never
but
remember what
but
it stands for.
Teresa takes
That's the
me,
reason I don't
to,
like it.
Well,
that's
what's
a-
going
to
on?
a doctor.
Yeah.
She has to park, and you know how crowded it is over there.
Yeah.
So when I get out of a doctor's appointment,
Next
and
one.
I
Too many
like just
syllables.
ask her number in there, and she
Call
does
her.
a big,
On the
that's
next
the
one
only,
she makes.
the only reason I
You get
have
where it
a
says
cell
like right
phone.
down,
Oh.
And it's costing me $50 a month.
Now, that would
Just-
work.
just-
Like in
use
small,
So
small
yeah.
letters and stuff.
Yeah.
Check your
That's
email
what
on
you
your
gotta do when
computer at home.
Every day.
Yeah.
Well, just for this case,
I do email,
we
text,
go
and
into
everything on my
something
phone,
more,
Facebook.
more
Well,
detailed.
I'm learning this stuff, see, all this stuff
Yeah.
at my halfway waypoint in love.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm not up on, and I don't wanna learn anything about.
She taught him everything.
Yeah.
I go back to the, and you probably remember when they came out, did you have to take a computer course when you were in
Oh,
school?
they work. Well, no, at work, because we used to have secretaries.
And you
Then they said, you can do your own stuff.
Oh,
So they
okay,
taught us how to use
What
all
I'm
the
gonna do
applications.
is,
yeah.
I'm gonna.
See, it's just like,
We got
I'm sure,
first
just,
video I made here today was 33
wonders
minutes.
what the hell it is to me, because,
Stuff,
I
wanna
am
make
so
sure it's recording good and
disorganized,
everything.
but when I was
This one's.
doing all this research and stuff, I had a secretary that came with me, and she took all the notes. I didn't have to worry about, being organized, because I would have raised hell if she wasn't organized.
Right.
Because she kept, because I
Turn
had
off some
20 projects that I could handle at one time, I couldn't do 21, I would get all screwed up. And that's a true story.
Yeah.
And
The intro, I saw,
to do
I
all the
saw three
inventions
of
I
them.
got.
Yeah, I
I
got.
saw
I
three
got the-
intros.
Well, what I'm
This is
gonna
all, you did these yourself with no help.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I'm gonna do
Some of
is.
that doesn't work.
What we'll do is, the
bad.
first video that we
It was
did
early on in
was
the
30
evening.
minutes, and then I
So
stopped it, because I
there
wanted to
wasn't
make sure it was
much running on
recording sound and
email.
everything, so I started doing another one, so we got over 2 hours of video.
Young people who
And
need
what I'm gonna do is, when I get home tonight,
You
we'll
can
mix
set the whole
everything
game,
together,
now you
make it
can't.
one video, that will
Yeah, I can
have
teach
the intro in there, and
Sure.
we'll also have the outro, but also,
If you would have
video,
applied
like,
yourself,
I'm
you know, a
gonna
lot of
listen to the
times,
whole thing over again, and
you know,
certain things we
I,
talk about, I'll have pictures and stuff
when
like
I
that.
quit
along, so
working,
it's gonna be
and
like
moved
little
over
video
to,
things, so
Buchanan,
it'll
Georgia,
look great.
I wanted to teach some students, and so I signed up to be a student,
It's all in
a
here, see?
substitute.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
And,
If you need the
you
whole
know, I
thing,
had a waiting list.
Alright.
Yeah,
People really
this one's
wanted
2
me
hours
to
and 40
teach them,
minutes.
because I didn't turn on
That should be
movies.
about right.
Yeah.
This one
People were in
is
the class, and
1
I was
hour
sitting
50,
there,
the other one was,
you
yep,
were
so
gonna
that's
learn
about the
something.
same.
Right.
Alright, so let me stop recording.